Chapter 2592. Little Neil was less than 20 meters away from Chen. However, Chen's little world was obstructed by these short 20 meters. Chen Feng raised his finger, and a black ball condensed between his fingers. He casually pointed at Neil, and the black ball shot out towards him. However, the black ball suddenly disappeared in the middle of its flight. Huh. Jen was surprised. Just as Jen was about to step through the door, Navots pulled him back. Don't go in. It's very scary inside. I feel like my mana has been contaminated. Every bit of mana I use brings me one step closer to the darkness. Chen was no stranger to this. This was the power of hell. In fact, the aura of hell here was even stronger than that of the demonic island. This place wasn't as big as Demon Island, and it wasn't filled with demons like Demon Island. However, the environment here was truly like hell. What's up there? Just then, Madame Olette pointed at the ceiling and exclaimed. Above their heads, there was a layer of film-like substance. The thin film spread out from the door and covered the entire ceiling of the basement. What the hell is that? Olette's face was also filled with terror. Jen was also confused. This was clearly not a naturally occurring substance. These thin films were releasing an aura filled with the smell of sulfur. It was as if this thing had turned this place into hell, and this thing seemed to be expanding. At this moment, everyone realized that the ground had become sticky. The ground that was originally covered with concrete had now turned into a swamp. The concrete floor turned to sludge. Following that, terrifying monsters began to crawl out from within. These monsters were all strangely shaped. Some had slender bodies, while others had 2 legs on the left and 1 on the right. Some had 2 heads, while others had eyes all over their heads and bodies. They looked like something that had crawled out of an abstract painting by Picasso. That kind of asymmetrical feeling was very uncomfortable. Owlette and his wife screamed in fear. With a wave of his hand, a dozen or so black balls shot out. The abstraction-type monsters were blasted into pieces by Chin Fan. However, these abstract monsters did not have any substantial lethality. At least, Chin didn't sense any threat from them. They were more like the physical manifestation of some kind of power. Chun looked at little Neil, who had been standing there the entire time. Little Neil had a strange smile on his face. There was no innocence, nor was it pure evil. Anyway, that kind of smile made people feel uncomfortable. Jen grabbed a black ball. With a flick of his finger, the black ball flew out. But the black sphere disappeared again, just like Jen's first attack. However, although the black ball had disappeared from Chen's sight, Chen could not see it. However, when Chen had created the black ball, he had added dark magma. Therefore, no matter where the black ball disappeared or went, Chen would be able to sense it, unless the black sphere was blocked by a different dimension. However, Chen could still clearly feel the presence of the black ball. In other words, the black sphere was still there and had not truly disappeared. However, Chen couldn't be sure where the black ball had gone. Chen had an idea. He looked back at Violet and his wife. Do you mind if I tear down your house? Huh. The couple was dumbfounded. They did not understand what Chen meant. Chin, we're about to lose our lives. How can we care about other things? The most important thing right now is to think of a way to escape. We can talk about other things later. Daleymore's words were not directed at Chin. Instead, she was reminding the couple. Mr. Chen, Daleymore is right. The most important thing right now is to escape. Then I don't have to worry about anything. Hundreds of small black balls appeared around Jen. These black balls weighed anywhere from a few thousand to tens of thousands of tons. Chen could lift a black ball weighing 10 million tons with his little heaven and earth. However, he could easily create and control hundreds of black balls that were hundreds or thousands of times smaller. Chen waved his hand and hundreds of black balls shot at little Neil. However, the hundreds of black balls disappeared again, just like before. The next moment, Chin snapped his fingers. In an instant, all the black balls that were lost in the unknown area were devoured and exploded. Every single one of these black balls was extraordinarily powerful. Even the weakest one was several times more powerful than a grenade. Thousands of tons of air was compressed into a ball with a diameter of 3 to 4 centimeters and released instantly. The impact it caused was definitely more terrifying than a grenade. Although the two energy release methods were different, one was physical energy, the other was a chemical reaction. The effect was the same. They both produced an impact through the instantaneous release of energy. The weakest one was several times more powerful than a grenade. The stronger ones, weighing tens of thousands of tons, were even more terrifying. When all the small black balls exploded in an instant, the black balls exploded. Mr. and Mrs. Alet, Dahlia Moore, and Nawats Hingis all looked up. They saw that the ceiling above them had disappeared. Not only had the ceiling disappeared, but the entire villa had also disappeared. A terrifying air current held above their heads. As expected, Chin had already guessed it. Now he was even more certain of his guess. Navat Singh had long known how terrifying Chin was. After all, she had experienced it herself. Thus, her reaction was the calmest. The couple were ordinary people to begin with. They had been frightened out of their wits. They had no idea what had happened. Without the villa, Chun Zhao could finally feel the space around him more directly. The small world that had been surrounded by darkness suddenly became clear under the starry sky. Chen's little heaven and earth had completely expanded. Chen was no longer suppressed. He was no longer confined to a small space. Chun shot out another black ball. When the black ball was 10 meters away from little Neil, it suddenly made a turn and shot into the sky at a right angle. Although Chen's little heaven and earth had expanded, it still couldn't approach Neil. It was as if there was also a powerful little heaven and earth in front of him. Chen's little heaven and earth couldn't advance at all. This was definitely not a power that a newly awakened youth could possess and control. There was a powerful soul in Neil's body. Get out of that child's body. Just then Neil spoke. Do you know who I am? To be precise, it was the soul in his body. No, Chen said calmly. You don't have to tell me your identity. I'm not interested. Chapter 2593. Chen Zhao shook his arm and a neutron star condensed in his right palm. At the same time, little Neil also attacked. A black cloud appeared behind little Neil as gigantic red claws extended out from the black cloud. Chun Zhao's right hand was condensing the neutron star, while his left finger pressed down. Instantly, the pressure in the small world before him increased by 100 times. The red claws were pressed to the ground and shattered. However, the flesh crushed by the giant red claw was squirming. It even showed signs of reassembling. Chun Zhao raised an eyebrow. 1,000 times the pressure. Chun Zhao's left finger pressed down again. Instantly, a terrifying force crushed the flesh on the ground. The flesh and blood were directly compressed to the point of separation. This wasn't enough. Chun Zhao's finger kept pressing down. It was like a huge hammer pounding the flesh into paste. The terrifying force kept hitting the ground. The flesh had already turned into paste. Just then, Chun Zhao realized that his small world was absorbing the flesh. It was very, very weak, but very clear. After absorbing the flesh, the small world started condensing life force. Chun Zhao was surprised. Was this the real use of the small world? The paste that Chun Zhao had pounded gradually lost its vitality as the small world kept absorbing. Little Neil didn't notice anything strange. He was still summoning the giant red claws. Chun Zhao's lips twitched. His eyes were filled with mockery. But look at Daily Moore, not Sing, and the owlets. Chun Zhao and Little Neil were clearly engaged in an extremely dangerous battle of magical powers. Chun Zhao, on the other hand, seemed to be at a disadvantage. Chun Zhao's attacks weren't the kind that could be seen. Chen Zhao only controlled the small world to crush the giant red claws. Little Neil's attacks seemed more threatening. He seemed to be suppressing Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao was struggling to hold on. The amount of life force he could absorb was very little, but it was better than nothing. The giant red claws weren't pure living creatures. They were probably only formed by Little Neil's power. Chen Zhao thought, what if they're real living creatures? And what if they're humans? Little Neil's expression turned serious. Clearly, he realized that Chen Zhao wasn't an ordinary opponent. Just then, Chen Zhao's neutron star was complete. Chen Zhao pushed neutron star out. Even though he had yet to touch Little Neil, he could still sense the terrifying power contained within the seemingly insignificant, or even insignificant, black ball. Little Neil's eyes widened as he raised his palms with all his might. Ah! Little Neil let out a low growl. It was as if he was lifting something heavy. The small world in front of him also began to distort. At the same time, he could have resisted Chen Zhao's small world. But to block Chen Zhao's neutron star, he had to concentrate the power of his domain. This caused the invasion of Chen Zhao's small world. Chen Zhao realized that Neil's little world seemed to be distorted. He recalled that he was able to change the trajectory of his black ball at a right angle. Now that he thought about it, he finally understood what Neil's little world was for. If Chen Zhao's little world had no element, it was the purest form of power. Then Little Neil's pocket world was to create distorted passageways. Just like Chen Zhao's previous attack, a small black ball shot toward Neil. Through spatial distortion, Little Neil had directly caused the black ball to bend. To the black ball, it had been flying in a straight line all along. But to outsiders, it looked like it was making a turn. However, there was a limit to the power of spatial distortion. The black ball was like a piece of paper, but neutron star was like a steel plate. The difficulty of playing with it was naturally much higher. Suddenly, a malicious smile appeared on Chen Zhao's face. Just as he was about to release neutron star, he suddenly thought of something. Chen Zhao retracted his palms. Little Neil roared angrily. When everyone looked at Little Neil, they realized that his body seemed to have bent. In fact, because everyone's vision had been distorted, Little Neil's body also became distorted when they looked at him. But under Little Neil's forceful spatial distortion, neutron star was finally sent to the sky. Neutron star shot into the sky. Boom! Without any source of light, it was like thunder. At the same time, the clouds in the sky were swept away. Instantly, the entire night sky cleared up. Everyone looked at the star-filled sky in shock. It was unprecedentedly dazzling and eye-catching. The Owlets, Dalymore, and Nawat Singh were all stunned by this shocking scene. The entire sky above Los Angeles turned bright. A huge hole appeared in the clouds in the sky. Chen Zhao started walking toward Little Neil. Because Chen Zhao's small world had completely invaded Little Neil's. So he didn't need to worry about Little Neil's counterattack anymore. With a serious expression, Little Neil took 2 steps back. Stop! To move neutron star away, Little Neil had used up a lot of energy. Now he couldn't even let his small world fight Chen Zhao's. You can't stop me. If you come near me again, I'll kill this host, Little Neil roared. Chen Zhao stopped. The Owlets panicked. Mrs. Owlet shouted, "What do you want? We promise you, don't hurt our child." Chen Zhao didn't speak, although he didn't want to let this powerful soul go. But he could understand the couple's choice. If he put himself in their shoes, he would make the same choice. After all, his child was in someone else's hands. In the end, it was the Owlets who had invited him. So, there was no need for him to continue being the bad guy. But this didn't mean that he could just watch the powerful soul that had taken over Little Neil's body escape. I want you to leave immediately. Now. The couple looked at Chen Zhao, but Chen Zhao stood where he was without moving. Sir, Chen Zhao glanced at the couple. If you back off, your child will be doomed. He'll kill your child's soul and then reconstruct his body. Of course, if you want me to leave now, don't come looking for me in the future. But little Neil is still in his hands. Chinzhao licked his lips. If you leave this to me, I have a way to force his soul out. Maybe you can make my soul leave this body, but you can't stop me from killing this body. Then let's make a bet. Chen Zhao looked at the boy's appearance calmly. Kill this child. This is your only chance. Then I'll kill your soul. Chapter 2594. If he killed the child, his soul would lose its attachment. By then, Chen Zhao would have nothing to worry about. But facing Chen Zhao's aggressiveness, the powerful soul in the child's body was very passive. However, Chen Zhao had already expressed his attitude. If he didn't leave something behind today, then he definitely wouldn't be able to escape. He would either leave the child's body or his soul. But if he gave up this body, he would lose his last bit of support. After all, there was no way to restrain Chen Zhao. By then, his life and death wouldn't be up to him. The owlets looked nervously at the two people confronting each other. It wasn't that they didn't know what was good for them. They knew that not speaking now was the best choice. The situation here wasn't something they could participate in at all. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about risking his life, but the power that Chen Zhao had displayed was clearly stronger than his. And now his little world had been completely taken over by Chen Zhao. Now he could only hide in his little world. He wouldn't let Chen Zhao succeed so easily. He had predicted that this was the end of days. There was almost no one he could fight against. Even in the prosperous magic era, there were only a few people who could fight against him. So he was confident that reviving in this era was the safest and safest. Then he could slowly wait for the next prosperous magic era to arrive. In this era, he had enough time to accumulate wealth, resources, and manpower. He was already very familiar with this. He had experienced the end of days 3 times. The cycle of each spiritual tide was 500 years. In other words, he had experienced a span of 1,500 years. Of course, this didn't mean that he was 1,500 years old. Instead, he would wake up at a specific time each time. He was very accurate at this time. Every time, he would occupy a youth's body and use a small amount of time to recover his cultivation to prolong his life. Then he would occupy resources and wait for the spiritual tide to arrive. That way, he could get twice the results with half the effort during the prosperous magic era. The strong people who rose in the prosperous magic era couldn't surpass him either. After all, others rose with the era. But he could reach the peak at the beginning of the prosperous magic era. The first 3 times had been smooth, but he didn't expect this. He had just revived and already encountered such a troublesome problem. The man before him was even stronger than he had been at his peak. He had met all sorts of geniuses. Some geniuses could even threaten him. But even a genius needed time to accumulate. However, the man in front of him was unbelievably powerful, and he was very young. Chen Zhao made him feel extremely threatened. After all, he had originally thought that there were no experts in this era. Even if there were, they would be very old. They must have started cultivating during the middle and late stages of the spiritual energy tide. Therefore, they didn't have much time left. Basically, it was impossible to hold out until the next spirit chi tide arrived. Although the bodies he occupied were usually those of youths without any magic power. However, his realm was there, so his strength recovered very quickly. He had only occupied this body for a few days, but he had already recovered 70% of his strength. However, this was basically all the power he could recover. If he wanted to increase his strength, he wouldn't have to recover, but cultivate. At the same time, because he had slept and cultivated his soul 3 times, it had been close to 500 years. This was also why Chen Zhao felt that his soul was very powerful. Chen Zhao and little Neil were in a stalemate. The powerful soul in little Neil's body couldn't escape, but it couldn't beat Chen Zhao either. Moreover, His soul power had to recover to its previous realm before he could take over another body. Otherwise, even if his soul took over another body, it would be greatly damaged. This was because every time he took over someone else's body, he would sacrifice a portion of his power so that he could quickly fuse with the body. But now he had already sacrificed a portion of his soul power, but before it could completely fuse with the body, Qin Zhao had come to him. If he wanted to take over a new body next time, he had no more soul power to sacrifice, so he could only sacrifice the essence of his soul. Suddenly, little Neil felt something appear in his little world. However, because of the interference of Qin Zhao's little world, he couldn't clearly feel what it was. Little Neil immediately tensed up. He didn't see anything in his field of vision, but he knew that Qin Zhao definitely wouldn't coexist peacefully with him. Qin Zhao must be doing something that he didn't know. Just then, a smile appeared on Qin Zhao's face. "It's here." Little Neil's body tensed up instantly. The owlets also became very nervous. They seemed to have seen something too. Just then, little Neil saw a black ball appear in front of him. Qin Zhao's little world had already completely invaded little Neil's little world. Therefore, he could condense the black ball at any location within the range. Little Neil knew the terrifying power of these black balls. Did he want to completely destroy the boy's body? Damn, this guy is a demon. Little Neil instantly cast a powerful magic shield on himself. At the same time, the black ball exploded. Boom! With a loud bang, little Neil's magic shield received a huge impact. However, little Neil felt that the might was a little weaker. It wasn't as strong as he imagined. Did he use up his magic too? Or did he have other plans? Little Neil's expression grew more and more serious. Just then, little Neil felt something burrowing out from under his feet. Little Neil immediately rose into the air. A smile appeared on Qin Zhao's face. Little Neil suddenly felt his head hit something. He looked up and saw a black substance. The black substance was covering his head. It was waiting for him to crash into it. Damn, I was tricked. Only then did little Neil realize that both the black ball and the thing hidden in the ground were just a feint. The real killer move was the black substance. It was precisely because his little world's senses were messed up. As a result, he didn't even know what had invaded his domain. He didn't even know where it was. At the same time, the dark lava poured into little Neil's mouth. "Little Neil!" the owlets exclaimed. They could only watch as their child was swallowed by the dark lava, but they couldn't do anything. "Come out!" Qin Zhao let the dark lava pour into little Neil's mouth, nose, and ears. However, Qin Zhao didn't plan to show this scene to the owlets. Chapter 2595. In the churning dark lava, the powerful soul escaped from Neil's body. Roar! A humanoid figure flipped out of the dark lava. However, this figure was completely covered in dark lava. "Since you want me to leave that body, then give me your body." The powerful soul ignored the dark magma on its body and launched its final attack on Jen. However, Qin didn't even give him a chance to get close. A wave of dark magma converged and smashed the powerful soul into pieces. The powerful soul was covered by the dark lava again. "You damned bastard!" Qin was still expressionless, ignoring the powerful soul's curses. However, the dark lava suddenly ignited with red nirvana flames. "Ah!" the powerful soul cried out in pain. The dark lava with nirvana flames suddenly shot out a sharp spike, piercing through the soul's chest. The soul struggled even more frantically. Qin raised his eyebrows. A strange feeling filled his heart. Compatible enemy. This was a long-lost feeling. Back when Qin activated the soul key, the first compatible enemy he encountered was the black dragon in the Tower of Trials. The so-called compatible enemy was an old enemy. What kind of enemy was a good enemy? Of course, it was a dead enemy. Actually, they didn't have any grudges. However, they were compatible enemies. This also meant that they were destined to be enemies. If he let him go today, they would become mortal enemies in the future. Chin devoured the soul fragment he tore out of the soul's chest. Countless knowledge and memories surged into Chen's mind. However, this soul fragment was too small. Many of the memories were very fragmented. There wasn't a complete memory at all. But at least Chin knew the name of this powerful soul. Adu Rainster from England, the first group of exiles on the American continent. Of course, rather than being exiled, it was better to say that he was self-exiled. However, that was all Qin Zhao knew. Just then, Adu Rainster launched another counterattack. "Let's die together." Adu Rainster seemed to feel that Chen's attack was damaging his soul. This made him want to die. Bright red flames ignited on Adu Rainster's body. It was even redder and more shocking than Nirvana flames. It was the fire of life, a flame at the cost of life. Meanwhile, Adu Rainster had forced the dark lava away. Adu Rainster didn't choose to flee this time. Instead, he charged at Qin. The formless Adu Rainster actually engaged in melee combat with Qin Play. He swung his fist at Qin. Although Adu Rhinestone was in soul form, his soul form was 4 meters tall, more than twice the size of Jen's. However, Qin Zhao was curious as to what the point of such an attack was. Therefore, Qin did not dodge at all. But when the punch landed on Chen's body, Jen's head spun, and he staggered a few steps back. At the same time, Jen's soul was almost smashed out of his body. The next moment, Chen's soul returned to his body. Jen shook his head and looked at Adu Rainster in shock. What a terrifying soul attack. The focus of that punch was not a physical attack at all. Instead, it was an attack from the soul. At this time, Adu Rhinestone's second attack came. It was another simple punch. This time, Jen didn't dare to take the punch head-on. Instead, he quickly retreated to avoid the punch. At this moment, Chen's eyes shone with a ferocious light. Adu Rhinestone was both anxious and angry when he saw that his second punch didn't hit Chen. After all, the first punch could be said to be unexpected. He had thought that even if he couldn't kill Chen with his first punch, he would still be able to kill Chen. At the very least, it could damage Chen's soul. Then he would be able to attack continuously. It was like a fight between two ordinary people. Whoever stabbed the other party first would have the advantage. That was Adu Rhinestone's plan. However, he didn't expect Chen's soul to be more resilient than he had imagined. It only took an instant for his soul and body to fuse back together. This caused his second attack to miss. The longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. This was because he was completely relying on burning his life force to temporarily increase the combat power of his soul. He couldn't last long at all. This time, Adu Rainster pounced at Qin, although they were currently engaged in a magical battle. But sometimes street fighting was the most direct and simple way to determine who was better. However, Adu Rhinestone didn't expect something like this to happen. At this moment, Jen also chose to pounce on him. With a physical body, Qin was far superior to Adu Rhinestone in every aspect. This caused Adu Rhinestone to be pinned down by Qin. Jen pounced on Adu Leinster, then bent down and bit Adu Leinster's shoulder. Ah, what are you doing? Adu Rhinestone screamed in terror. The pain from his soul made him wail, almost crazily. However, Qin didn't care about Adu Rhinestone at all. The soul fragment was chewed a few times in Chen's mouth. With the high temperature of the flame of life, it was swallowed into Chen's stomach. Although it was painful, it was still within Chen's acceptable range. Ever since Chen had completely fused with the blood of gluttony, Qin was already a hybrid with demon blood. At this point, Qin could already eat like a glutton. Moreover, the target was Chen's natural enemy. Thus, Qin Qi directly devoured Adu Rhinestone. However, to Chen's surprise, Adu Rhinestone's soul, which was burning with the flame of life, was even more delicious than he had imagined. It was even better than the most delicious food Qin had ever eaten. Qin licked his lips. Your soul is delicious. Instantly, Adu Rhinestone's hair stood on end. Behind him, Daily Moore, Nabbotsinger, and Olette almost peed their pants. Devouring souls. Even the thought of it was terrifying. Compared to Adu Rhinestone, they felt that Chun was even scarier. Get out of my way! Adu Rhinestone pushed at Chun with both arms. However, Chun pressed down on Adu Rhinestone's arms with both hands. Adu Rhinestone couldn't move his arms at all. Chun bent down again and bit down hard on Adu Rhinestone's neck. This time, Chun tore out a large piece of Adu Rhinestone's soul fragment. Half of Adu Rhinestone's neck was gone. Chun heavily sucked the soul fragment into his mouth. His cheeks puffed up. Chun chewed with all his might and swallowed with difficulty. Chapter 2596. In Everyone's Eyes. Chen Zhao was the scariest demon. Demon power. Chen Zhao discovered something from Yadu Rainstor's soul fragment. His power was very similar to Chen Zhao's. They both came from hell and demons. However, he was very different from Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao's power belonged to him, but Yadu Rainstor's power was borrowed from a demon. He had to return the borrowed power. When Chen Zhao devoured half of Yadu Rainstor's soul, a magic formation suddenly appeared on the ground where Yadu Rainstor was lying. A demonic hand reached out from the formation and grabbed Yadu Rainstor's soul. The demonic hand emanated a terrifying aura. Even if it was just a hand, Chen Zhao's eyes flashed with displeasure. As he grabbed Yadu Rainstor with one hand, he smashed the demonic hand with the other. The demonic hand was smashed into pieces. Who is it? The magic formation suddenly turned into an abyss. A terrifying and angry voice spread from the depths of the abyss. Fuck you! Chen Zhao held Yadu Rainstor's soul and floated in the air. He retorted at the owner of the voice in the abyss. The owner of that demonic hand was a great lord-class demon. But so what? Just a little bit of power was already the limit of a demon lord. This bit of power wasn't even enough to scratch an itch for Chen Zhao. Even if his real body could come to the human world, Chen Zhao wouldn't be afraid of him. Human, I'll remember your aura. Just you wait. The greater demon overlord could only say some harsh words and not continue to infiltrate his power. He could also feel Chen Zhao's aura. Chen Zhao was at the same level as him. Unless his true body appeared, no matter how much power he used, it would all be useless. The greater demon overlord also understood that the two sides were separated by a world. Thus, they couldn't do anything to each other. Now that he was on Chen Zhao's main battlefield, he was even more helpless. The so-called threatening words were just giving himself a way out when he couldn't do anything. Chen Zhao glanced at the half-dead Yadu Rainstor in his hand. Most of his soul had been eaten by Chen Zhao. At the moment, his mind wasn't clear. Every time Chen Zhao bit off a piece of the soul, he gained more. Unlike when he absorbed the black dragon soul, he only obtained a small number of fragments. This time, Chen Zhao's devouring method was more direct. As a result, the knowledge gained would also increase. Chen Zhao had a rough understanding of Yadu's power. Yadu Rainstor had been a magician for hire in his early years, not to mention leading a great battle. Every time he went on the battlefield, he was surrounded by danger. However, his luck was not bad. He picked up a ring with a demonic mark. The original owner of this ring had a contract with that greater demon overlord. It was a very simple contract, similar to the modern usury. The greater demon lord would lend its power to the contractor in exchange for a soul sacrifice. Of course, the sacrifices were all other people's souls. However, the souls sacrificed each time were only counted as interest. Yadu Rainstor was indeed a capable person. His predecessor was abandoned because he was unable to repay the interest of the previous greater demon overlord. However, Yadu Rainstor had maintained this state for 1,500 years, and half of that time had been spent in slumber. Under such circumstances, he could still repay the interest of the greater demon overlord. One could imagine how many souls he had sacrificed in the past. Even the greater demon overlord admired Yadu Rainster. He felt that Yadu was a promising talent. Every time Yadu Rainster obtained a new body, he would receive a gift from the greater demon overlord, giving him a longer life than normal people. Of course, this admiration came with a price. Yadu Rainster's conflict with the greater demon overlord became even more complicated. The greater demon overlord could even sense Yadu Rainster's condition. For example, just now, Yadu Rainster's soul had been severely damaged. Using the contract, the greater demon overlord sent his power into the human world. He wanted to take back what Yadu Rainster owed him with interest. If it was someone else, they wouldn't be able to protect their spoils of war. Only Chen Zhao dared to face a greater demon overlord head-on. The magic formation gradually dissipated. Chen Zhao looked at the incomplete soul in his hand. He didn't plan on letting Yadu Rainster go. As for Nawat Singh and Delamore, their senses were much more stimulated than the owlets. After all, the owlets had only felt the impact of their naked eyes. But the two of them were facing a terrifying pressure that seemed to be solid. Facing an enemy like that, they didn't even have the courage to resist. They couldn't shatter the demon's hand like Chen Zhao had. Chen Zhao was silent for a long time. He muttered the demon's name in his heart. Shane Kaslafar. It wasn't a good thing to be targeted by a greater demon overlord. Perhaps Shane Kaslafar thought that he couldn't enter hell. But that didn't mean he didn't want to take revenge. Perhaps he couldn't fight Chen Zhao head-on in the human world. But if he wanted to create some trouble for Chen Zhao, it wouldn't be a problem. Clearly, Shane didn't know that Chen Zhao remembered his vicious words. Chen Zhao had always adhered to the principle of never waiting for revenge. Moreover, he wanted to use Shane Kaslafar for a small experiment. After devouring Yadu Rainster's soul, Chen Zhao had a clearer understanding of Shane Kaslafar. Of course, Yadu Rainster was only Shane Kaslafar's second party. His understanding of Shane Kaslafar was very limited. Chen Zhao glanced at the owlets. Little Neil's body appeared in the dark lava. He was sound asleep. Little Neil was sent to the owlets. Chen, what's wrong with him? Delamore asked. His soul is severely damaged, Chen Zhao said calmly. If you had come to me during the first 1 or 2 days after his body was taken, his soul wouldn't have been so badly damaged. But a week has passed and half of his soul has been absorbed by that guy. Just now, I forced that guy out of the child's body, so his soul was torn even more. Why did you do that? You could have saved my child. Owlet stared at Chen Zhao angrily. Chen Zhao glanced at her indifferently. What do you think I should have done? I've already done everything I could. If you think that I didn't care about your son and let him become nourishment for that soul, then I'm sorry, but I was wrong. Chapter 2597. Facing the cowering couple. Chen Zhao didn't want to argue with them. Chen Zhao didn't want to bother with the couple who loved their son too much. At least, they dared to speak rudely to him when he was scary. It showed their love for their child. Chen Zhao wasn't in a good mood, but he still turned and left. Under their gazes, Chen Zhao soared into the sky and disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. Hey, old Zhang, I want to ask you something. You rarely talk to me in such a serious tone. What is it? Is there a demonic path in this world? Huh? What are you looking at that made you dumbfounded? No, there's no absolute demonic path in this world. There are evil sects, but there are no demonic paths. So you're saying that techniques that can absorb people's vitality don't exist like in movies and novels. There are cultivation techniques or spells that can absorb one's essence, chi, and spirit, but I've never heard of a cultivation technique that can absorb one's vitality. Why? You met one? Chen Zhao didn't want to tell Zhang Tianyi that he'd learned a technique that could absorb other people's vitality. He was worried that Zhang Tianyi wouldn't be able to control his inner demon. After all, it was normal for people to be more afraid of death as they grew older. To prolong one's life, who knew if he would do something that would cross the line? Chen Zhao didn't dare to overestimate anyone's morality. even if the person was highly respected. Chen Zhao suddenly thought of a possibility. The heavenly pattern of the small world was like a growing sapling. The flesh and blood were like nutrients for the heavenly pattern. But Chen Zhao wasn't sure if everyone's small world and heavenly pattern were the same. Or did you learn a technique that absorbs other people's vitality? Zhang Tianyi seemed to have sensed something. Chen Zhao still answered Zhang Tianyi's question with silence. Zhang Tianyi seemed to confirm his guess. After a while, Zhang Tianyi said, "Can you tell me the specifics?" Chen Zhao was hesitating whether to tell Zhang Tianyi, but if Zhang Tianyi activated the heavenly pattern himself, he would eventually come into contact with it. The difference was nothing more than a question of whether it was a little earlier or a little later. In the end, Chen Zhao told Zhang Tianyi his discovery. Zhang Tianyi was silent for a while. "Are you afraid that I'll go down the wrong path? Don't you think I should be afraid?" Chen Zhao was really afraid that one day he would be on the opposite side of Zhang Tianyi. For an existence at Zhang Tianyi's level, no one would be able to keep him in check once he harbored evil thoughts. Chen Zhao was the only person in the world who could fight against him. "I already have some guesses about your situation." "You have a guess?" "What you're absorbing isn't the life force in the flesh, but the nutrients." Zhang Tianyi's guess seemed to be very consistent with his own. "You and I both know that the higher one's cultivation, the longer one's lifespan will be. However, the key question is, how is the process of transforming power into lifespan achieved? What you've discovered just proves that the process of transforming power into lifespan, although we haven't completely analyzed it, it has already taken us a big step forward." Zhang Tianyi paused for a moment, then continued, "The flesh that your enemy summoned was made entirely out of mana and didn't have any life force. However, your heaven and earth heavenly pattern was able to absorb it. This means that you weren't absorbing the life force of the flesh, but transforming it. You're already a big step ahead of the three of us. In fact, your progress is even faster than we imagined. In the next 100 years, you'll have enough time to become the world's top cultivator. And in the spiritual tide era after that, you'll be the best in the world." Zhang Tianyi's tone was a bit emotional, but also a bit envious. He wasn't envious of Chen Zhao's cultivation, but of his era. In the age of chaos, Chen Zhao's cultivation had almost reached the peak. His cultivation was enough for him to last until the spiritual tide era, and he even had a lot to spare. Moreover, with his surging life force, he didn't need to be like other cultivators of the same realm who didn't dare to fight even when they were old. For example, the 23rd generation Blood Mary. Her cultivation was indeed the best in the world. But now, she was like an ordinary old person. Even the slightest movement would hurt her muscles and bones. Every time she fought, she would use up a large amount of life force. To put it bluntly, the next 200 years would belong to Chen Zhao. And Chen Zhao wasn't just the best in terms of power. More importantly, he had thick skin and flesh. He had almost indestructible physical defense and terrifying magic resistance. This also eliminated the danger of him dying. Killing Chen Zhao was almost as difficult as destroying a modern country, and a country with nuclear weapons. After communicating with Zhang Tianyi, Chen Zhao suddenly felt happy. So he wasn't absorbing life force. Next, he would go to hell and kill the threat in the cradle. Chen Zhao took out another phone and called the handsome guy. "Hi." The video call went through. Chen Zhao saw a battlefield, a terrifying one. It was a scene of billions of demons fighting against a terrifying dragon, while the handsome young man stood in the air. Chen Zhao remembered that terrifying dragon, ancestral dragon. He had been lucky enough to accept the handsome guy's invitation and ride on ancestral dragon once. For Chen Zhao back then, and now, it was an extremely honorable thing. Rather than a battle, it was more like a one-sided massacre. Although there were countless of them, they were facing the most powerful dragon clan. When his wings were spread out, they could cover an entire city. A single breath from him could turn millions of evil demons into ashes. "What are you doing?" Chun Zhao asked. "Watching a massacre," the handsome guy said emotionlessly. It was indeed a massacre. The billions of demons Qin Zhao saw were only the remnants of the defeated army. The battlefield stretched across the boundless realm. Countless demon corpses were still lying on the ground. "I need to go to hell. Can you summon me there?" "Why do you want to go to hell?" Chan Zhao told them the whole story. Simply put, he had to get rid of the root of the problem. "Okay, now, yes." This was Chun Zhao's first time seeing a summoning. In the past, when Beelzebub Zophi summoned him, he could only see traces of a magic array left behind. However, the handsome young man's summoning was much simpler. He casually raised his hand, and the demon corpses below seemed to be affected by some kind of power. Their blood began to gather in the air, and a magic array hovering in the air was completed. Chapter 2598. In the blink of an eye, Chin had arrived in hell. The scene from the video was completely different from the feeling of being in a boundless battlefield. Even high up in the sky, Chin still couldn't see the end of the battlefield. Ancestral Graygon also sensed Chen's arrival. He still had some impression of this human. But to him, Chin was just a small interlude. It didn't affect his killing spree. Chin had an idea. "Ancestral Graygon, do you still need these corpses?" "Why? Even if you use them as food, they're the most disgusting food," the handsome guy answered matter-of-factly. "Do you need them?" "I'm not sure if I need them." The handsome guy gestured for Chin to go ahead. Chen landed on the battlefield. Even without Chen's control, the heavenly patterns in the small world were already absorbing the blood on the ground. Chin could feel that the small world was growing rapidly. The heavenly patterns in the small world were also flourishing. Chin was shocked. Why was the growth speed of the heavenly patterns faster than all the cultivation he'd done after activating them? One must know that his heavenly runes had been nurtured in the river diagram for several years, at the very least. But in just a few minutes, Chen's heavenly patterns had at least doubled in size. After a closer look, Chin found the problem. Within the range of Chen's little world, a corpse caught Chen's attention. Even though the corpse was already dead, it was still emitting a powerful aura. It was the corpse of a greater demon lord. The greater demon lord's corpse wasn't very large, but the aura it emitted was terrifying beyond compare. No wonder. Chen's heart skipped a beat. Raising his hand, a wave of energy descended from the air and blasted the corpse of the greater fiend overlord. Flesh and blood splattered in an instant. Chen greedily absorbed the greater demon lord's power, although the amount of life force he could produce wasn't much. Compared to Chen's total life force, it was just a drop in the ocean. But the heavenly patterns in Chen's small world were flourishing. Compared to ancestral Graygon, Chen was more like a trash picker. But Chen was very happy to pick them up. Just then, the handsome guy's voice reached Chen's ears. 1,000 miles ahead of you, there are 2 greater demon lords' corpses. Chen looked up at the handsome guy in the sky and nodded slightly. The value of the nearby greater demon overlord had basically been sucked dry by Chin. Chun Zhao ran straight to where the handsome guy was pointing. Although the corpses of the 2 greater demon overlords were inconspicuous, they were very easy to find. That was because they exuded an extraordinary aura. After absorbing the essence of the first great demon lord, Chin felt that the power of his little world had more than doubled. Rather than strength, it should be called growth. Chin used the same trick again, frantically absorbing the power of the 2 greater demon overlords as nutrients for the minor world pattern. Although the amount of life force was better than nothing, the growth of the small world had reached an astonishing level. The coverage of the small heaven and earth did not increase by much. Instead, it was more of an internal growth. The diameter of the pocket world was originally a little over 1,000 meters. Even after cultivating for a long time, it only extended to about 1,100 meters. Currently, the diameter of the small world was about 1,300 meters. Proportionally speaking, it had indeed grown a lot. However, compared to the increase in range, Qin was more concerned about the internal growth. After absorbing the essence of the two greater demon overlords, the power of Chen's little world had increased by at least 10 times. This was not the effect of 1 + 1. The difference between a 200-kilogram fatty and a 200-kilogram strongman was not just a little. In the past, Chen's little world had always been fat. It was huge, even bigger than Zhang Tianyi, 23rd Blood Mary, and Bifla's little world combined. However, in terms of strength, it was even weaker than them. After Zhen activated his little world, the situation had improved considerably. Now, after a few internal growth, Chen's little world was much stronger than before. Just then, the handsome guy's voice sounded again. "Your domain is very special." "Special?" Chen's heart skipped a beat. "What's so special about it?" "Your domain has no attributes, but it has the ability to break down and reassemble other people's energy." Break down and reassemble? Qin was a little dazed. Even he could not understand the principles behind his little world pattern's operation. However, the handsome guy could see the principles behind his little world pattern at a glance. Everyone's domain is different, right? Actually, everyone's domain is the same. No matter how it manifests, the effect is the same. It absorbs spiritual energy from the outside world and transforms it into your own magic. Of course, it manifests differently, but the essence is the same. For example, you can use your domain to create neutron stars. That's the difference in manifestation. However, your domain can break down and reassemble other people's energy. That's very special. After all, Qin and the handsome guy were a Pacific Ocean apart, so Qin could only barely understand part of the content. The more profound questions, such as what the handsome guy had said about breaking down and reassembling other people's energy, all Jen could understand was the literal meaning. Also, the greater demon overlord you're looking for is in that direction. The handsome guy pointed Chun in that direction. "Thank you. You're welcome. Also, don't forget my request." "It's already in progress." "That's good. I'll go there first. If there's time, we can talk again." "Go." "It'll be a tough battle," the handsome guy said. "Is that Shane Kaslafar very strong?" The handsome guy suddenly smiled. "If I reveal the answer now, it'll be very boring. You should experience the battle yourself. Trust me, it'll be very meaningful to you." Hearing the guy's words, Qin could not help but be curious. What kind of battle would be meaningful to him? Qin did not know how far away Shane Kaslafar was from him. Anyway, if he followed the direction the handsome guy had pointed out, he would definitely be right. Chan moved forward in energy form, so he was naturally very fast. He also intentionally hid his aura. Shane Kaslafar remembered his aura. If Qin approached him, he would definitely sense it and raise his guard. Chapter 2599. In the southwest of Hell, in the center of the Black Land, there was a huge volcano that never calmed down. This volcano was called the Volcano of Despair. The volcano was tens of thousands of meters tall, and hot magma bubbled in the crater all year round. The diameter of the crater was even more shocking than the height of the volcano. It was 200,000 meters in diameter, more than enough to put a town inside. Within millions of square kilometers, it was all black land. There was no vegetation at all, and no demons or forces dared to stay here. As long as it was black, it only belonged to a demon. Shane Kazrafa, the lava demon. This used to be one of the few rich countries in Hell, a country that belonged to demons. The nature of demons was difficult to restrain and manage, so demon kingdoms were rare existences in the vast Hell. Compared to the long lifespans of demons, demon countries could only exist for a very short time. 1,000-year kingdom was already considered a long time. thousands of years ago, Shane Khazrafa came. In just one night, the supervolcano erupted with world-destroying lava. Then, the demon country was razed to the ground. The name of the lava demon also resounded in the Black Land. In the following thousands of years, Shane Khazrafa continued to wreak havoc on this land. In the end, this fertile land became a wasteland. In the crater, on the floating island where the lava had not spread, a 20-meter-tall red demon sat on his lava throne. Just then, a figure descended from the sky and landed directly in the lava, causing huge waves. The figure gradually floated up from the lava pool. Standing above the pool, the lava under his feet instantly cooled and turned into black stones. "Lanka, I don't like people messing around in my territory." Shane Khazrafa looked at the newcomer with dissatisfaction. "Messing around? You're saying I'm messing around? I'm an honored guest you've invited." This demon, named Lanka, was almost the same size as a standard human. However, his skin was pale, and there was a pair of demon horns on his head. Shane Khazrafa was very unhappy with Lanka's provocation. "Don't forget where this is, and don't forget who I am." "Of course I remember, Lord Khazrafa." Ronco's tone was filled with obvious disdain, completely provoking Shane Khazrafa. However, Lanka suddenly saw that half of Shane Khazrafa's left arm was gone. "Hey, Khazrafa, you're actually injured. I'm very curious who broke your arm. With your injury, you won't be able to recover in less than 10 years. Shane's face darkened. "It has nothing to do with you. If you think you can do whatever you want in front of me just because I'm injured, you're gravely mistaken." Due to the injury to his arm, his strength had decreased. However, this was his main battlefield after all. He was not afraid of any enemy, even if it was his old enemy, Ice Calamity Lanku. Suddenly, a huge shadow appeared above the two greater demon overlords. Lanka and Shane Khazrafa both looked up and saw a huge black monster with a lion's head and a bird's body. This monster was hundreds of times bigger than Shane Khazrafa. Nelly. The two demons revealed a look of fear. The huge monster called Nelly landed at the edge of the crater. "Kiki, Khazrafa, what happened to your broken arm?" Nelly let out a strange laugh. Shane Khazrafa's expression was very ugly. It seemed like the first thing everyone did when they arrived was laugh at his broken arm. After that, the greater devil overlords from various places appeared one after another. There were more than 30 of them, and they were all terrifying existences. The first thing these 30 greater demon overlords did was laugh at Shane Khazrafa's broken arm. "Khazrafa, did you sacrifice your arm to Lord Alpha?" "Huh. Nicolo, you actually know how to joke. Enough. I didn't call you here today to make fun of me." Shane Khazrafa roared. "Isn't that so? I called you here today because of Lord Alpha's order." Shane Khazrafa took out a crimson token. All the greater demon overlords instantly shut up. A trace of respect appeared in their eyes. They were all Demon King Alpha's vassals. "Does anyone else have any objections?" "Lord Alpha ordered us to go to Obsidian City," Shane Khazrafa said calmly. "Not any of you, but all of us. Obsidian City? That Beelzebub Sophie? There's also his wife, Iris. Lord Alpha has ordered that the couple is not allowed to continue living. He's His Majesty Beelzebub's direct subordinate. If so many of us go together, won't we anger His Majesty?" "Humph. His Majesty Beelzebub is supreme. But why would he care about such a small matter?" Of course, although Shane Khazrafa said it was a small matter, everyone knew that it wasn't. But they all knew that it wasn't a small matter. They all knew the entanglement within. It wasn't that Demon King Beelzebub didn't care about such a small matter. It was just that it wasn't convenient for him to intervene. But it didn't mean that he couldn't do anything. They were Alpha's vassals. But compared to Beelzebub, Alpha and Beelzebub were completely different. Beelzebub was the supreme, great Demon King, and Alpha was only a secondary Demon King. It seemed like they were only one level apart. But this one level was a gap that could never be made up for. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, there was once when more than 50 secondary demon kings tried to overthrow a great demon king. And the target that they thought could be overthrown was great demon king Beelzebub. More than 50 secondary demon kings and thousands of greater demon overlords gathered an innumerable demon army. Then, great demon king Beelzebub appeared. With just one move, he swallowed all the secondary demon kings and all the greater demon overlords, as well as half of the demon army. That was also the only time that the secondary demon kings in hell were replaced on a large scale. At the same time, it made the other demons understand how big the difference between a secondary demon king and a great demon king was. In hell, no demon dared to disrespect a great demon king. Even a secondary demon king would tremble in fear when facing a great demon king. The dignity of a great demon king wouldn't allow any low-rank demon to offend him. Who's not here? Just then, Lang suddenly looked into the distance. An unfamiliar aura. Is it Lord Alpha's new vassal? Chapter 2600. Of the 36 great demon lords present, Kalang had the sharpest senses. He sensed that at the edge of the black scarlet land, there was a powerful aura approaching them at an astonishing speed. That aura was very unfamiliar, but also very powerful. Suddenly, Kalang's expression changed. That's not one of us. I can feel his murderous intent. He's coming for one of us. The expressions of the great lords were very strange. Who among them was he coming for? Since he was coming for one of the great lords, then they must know what was going on here. And he was still coming towards them. Was he courting death? Admittedly, the owner of that aura was very powerful. But there were so many great lords present. None of them were easy to deal with. Judging from the other party's aura, the other party should be about the same as the top experts among them. However, if the other party were to come here alone to cause trouble, it would mean that he was looking down on the group of overlords. I'll share the other party's aura with you. See for yourselves who knows this guy. Kalang said. At this moment, all of the great lords sensed this aura. Suddenly, Shane Kazlak stood up from the stone chair. A fierce light burst out of his eyes. He remembered this aura. Even if he turned to ashes, he would remember it. Shane Kazlak raised the scarlet token high up. I want all of you to attack with all your might and bring that guy to me, dead or alive. Although no one submitted to Shane Kazlak, but no one dared to disobey the scarlet token in Shane Kazlak's hand. Kalang glanced at Shane Kazlak and said, I can't use half of my power here. Shane Kazlak snorted coldly. How could he believe Kalang's words? Kalang was his old enemy. They had fought no less than 1,000 times in 10,000 years. So he knew Kalang's strength like the back of his hand. Within the range of the volcano of despair, Kalang's strength would indeed be affected. However, it was only a small impact. At their level, the environment had very little influence on them, unable to use half of their strength. Obviously, Kalang didn't want to help him. Previously, Kalang was the first to notice the other party's arrival. That was because he didn't know who the other party was targeting. But after seeing Shane Kazlak's reaction, everyone knew that they were here for Shane Kazlak. Meanwhile, the other party definitely didn't know that so many great lords were here. They only knew that Shane Kazlak was here. At this moment, a great lord whose entire body radiated a multicolored glow said, The other party is very fast. This greater demon overlord was called the Divine Sense Spirit. It wasn't in a physical form, but a pure spiritual body. Although he could not detect the aura at the edge of the black barren land like Coltrane did. However, within a certain range, he was able to sense all of the other party's movements. Faster than me? A great lord with a smooth, 3-meter-tall body asked confidently. He was a wind spirit, a creature born from the wind. He was born with the power of the wind. No one at the same level could surpass him in terms of speed. Let me create some trouble for him. Wind Spirit raised his arm. For a moment, the clouds in the sky surged. Chen Zhao could already see the super volcano hundreds of kilometers away. Without a doubt, the greater demon overlord's nest was that super volcano. However, the volcano was really frighteningly big. Too big. Even from hundreds of kilometers away, he could still see the outline of the volcano. Moreover, there wasn't just one aura there. Other than the familiar Shane Kazlak, there were a few other mixed auras. There was more than one greater demon overlord there. Chen Zhao's expression changed. Should he retreat now? Chen Zhao thought about it. If he retreated now, he'd lose a lot of face. He'd traveled thousands of kilometers to hell a world away. In the end, he'd run away without even seeing Shane. This was too embarrassing. Chen Zhao thought for half a minute. He finally made up his mind. He was indifferent to life and death. If he wasn't happy, he'd fight. Of course, Chen Zhao didn't know that there weren't just a few, but dozens of greater demon overlords in the volcano of despair. If Chen Zhao knew, he'd definitely turn around and leave. Even so, Chen Zhao didn't plan on charging right at them. Chen Zhao suddenly turned and flew into the sky. Huh? He sensed us. Ko Lang frowned. He seems to be flying high into the sky. His escape route is really strange. The greater demon lords didn't plan on intercepting him. For one, the distance was too far and the opponent was a speed type. At this distance, they couldn't catch up at all. Even Wind Spirit, who was most confident in speed, couldn't. Moreover, the opponent was at the same level as them. If they couldn't surround him, they couldn't do anything if he wanted to escape. So, instead of doing that, they might as well save some effort. A strange look flashed across Ko Lang's eyes. He sensed that the owner of the aura seemed to be flying higher into the sky. He wanted to go outside the void. Could it be that he was panicking and didn't know where he was going? After all, even greater demon lords of their level couldn't adapt to outside the void. Why was he flying outside the void? Ko Lang was filled with confusion, but he was also wary. It was very unlikely that the opponent was crazy. If he wasn't, he must have some other plan. No matter what, he had to be on guard. Ko Lang's senses were very far away, but he couldn't sense the exact situation. The spirit of consciousness, on the other hand, had a limited range. As for the other greater demon overlords, their perception range was even more limited. Ko Lang glanced at Shane Kazlak, but didn't remind him of the exact situation. At the same time, Chen Zhao realized that Hell's atmosphere was much thicker than Earth's. Even at a height of 100,000 meters, the air here was still very abundant. However, the cosmic radiation here was much stronger. Chen Zhao continued flying up. He wanted to see how thick Hell's atmosphere was. When they flew to a height of 300,000 meters, the thinness of the air here was equivalent to that of 30,000 meters on Earth. This was about the right place. Chen Zhao planned to use a meteor here. When he was on Demon Island, he'd used an incomplete meteor once. At that time, its power was equivalent to a small nuclear explosion. At this height, he didn't know what the effect would be if he smashed it with full weight. Chen Zhao was eager to try. He activated the third stage of the coalescence technique. Chapter 2601. It took 50 minutes. Chen Zhao finally completed the meteorite. Then he basically didn't need to do anything else. With the acceleration of gravity, the meteorite would have enough time to gain great kinetic energy before it hit the ground. Of course, Chen Zhao didn't just do nothing. Instead, he used all his strength to pull the meteorite down. This allowed the meteorite to gain more initial kinetic energy. Soon, Chen Zhao realized that he wasn't pulling the meteorite down anymore. Instead, he was being pressed down by the meteorite. The meteorite fell faster and faster. It was already heating up from the friction with the air. The speed of falling seemed to be beyond Chen Zhao's imagination. More accurately, it was out of Chen Zhao's control. What did it mean to fall from 300,000 meters in the sky? The potential energy from the acceleration of gravity was 1,000 times more destructive than something of the same mass falling from 30,000 meters. Plus, the power of Chen Zhao's small world had increased by 10 times. So, the meteorite's weight had also increased by more than 10 times. Chen Zhao cursed inwardly. He immediately used large amounts of gas to form a barrier around him. Chen Zhao wasn't sure if he could withstand such power if it hit the ground. But he had no way out now. Even if he wanted to give up, he couldn't stop. Colin stared at the sky. Suddenly, a meteorite appeared in everyone's vision. What's that? Colin pointed at the meteorite falling from the sky. It's that guy. He didn't escape. Shane Kazlak only saw a huge fireball, but he didn't sense the incoming danger. The fireball was indeed huge, but it wasn't enough to make him feel danger. He had the title of Lava Demon to begin with. His resistance to fire had also reached the extreme. After all, he could eat and drink in lava. Of course, his resistance to fire wasn't weak. So, he didn't care too much about the huge fireball. As for the other demon lords, they didn't care too much either. They were stronger than Shane Kazrak, not weaker. Similarly, no one would be afraid of a mere fireball, even if the fireball was ridiculously huge. Some greater demon overlords cast a defensive barrier on themselves. Some relied on their powerful physical bodies and didn't care about what was falling. Only Coltrane, who had no way of knowing what was falling from the sky. But it definitely wasn't a fireball. After all, he had been paying attention to Chen Zhao in the sky. Chen Zhao had only been in the sky for around 50 minutes, and he had created a fireball to entertain everyone? Stop joking. No one's brain is flooded with water. So, Colin silently used his strongest defense. However, he could not suppress the strong uneasiness in his heart. The falling speed of the fireball seemed to be a little unexpected. At this time, a greater demon overlord revealed a solemn expression. That spell seems very dangerous. No, that's not a fireball. We can't let it continue to fall. We have to stop it. Use the undying barrier. A greater fiend overlord raised an immortal barrier above the volcano. At this moment, the meteor touched the barrier of immortality amidst the rumbling thunder. Wow! The greater fiend overlord spat out a mouthful of blood. Quick! Meteor was even faster than the greater demon overlord and instantly fell into the lava pool. All the demon lords covered their eyes. Bang! A sun rose from the black land. Even millions of square kilometers away from the black land, one could still clearly see that extremely bright ball of light. The light could evaporate ordinary demons directly. Light was the first to be released, followed by a shockwave that began to spread in all directions with the volcano of despair as the center. With the power to destroy the heavens and the earth, it destroyed everything in its path as easily as crushing dry weeds. The first to be hit was naturally the volcano of despair. The peak was destroyed in an instant. Everything was gone in an instant. In the moment of the collision, Chen Zhao was the first to be hit. Chen Zhao's skin kept cracking and blood kept spurting out. Even though Chen Zhao was in his strongest state, even though he'd prepared everything beforehand. But now, Chen Zhao really felt like he was going to die. Under the huge impact, his body's functions were on the verge of collapse. Chen Zhao could not see anything. All his senses had been destroyed too. All that was left was soul-tearing pain. Just then, Chen Zhao felt the nirvana flame ignite in his body. He did not activate it on his own. He was forced to activate the nirvana flame. This meant that Chen Zhao was really close to death. Only when he was close to death would he activate the nirvana flame on his own. This feeling was very special. It was Chen Zhao's first time in this state. The pain disappeared and was replaced by another feeling. His flesh, blood, nerves, skin, and organs were all redistributed and reassembled. Finally, the familiar feeling returned. Chen Zhao suddenly swung his fist and shattered the thing wrapped around him. Chen Zhao opened his eyes again and scanned around him. He realized that he was standing on a broken eggshell. Chen Zhao was speechless. Not only had he learned the Phoenix's nirvana flame, but he'd also learned hatching. Chen Zhao knew clearly how long had passed. It should have been around a minute. This meant that Chen Zhao had used a minute to recover from his near-death state to his peak. No, this state was even better than his previous peak state. Chen Zhao glanced at the crater. The volcano of despair was gone. Instead, there was a super crater with a diameter of 3 kilometers. There were also the corpses of demons of various sizes around it. Chen Zhao realized that these corpses were all at the level of a great lord. However, there were still a few demons in the small world. They were not dead. Instead, they were heavily injured. These were all his spoils of war. Chen Zhao grinned. But just then, the ground not far in front of Chen Zhao protruded. A demon burrowed out. The demon did not seem to be injured. Then a white figure descended from the sky. Kolang looked at Chen Zhao. He'd sensed danger just now. Therefore, he decisively flew up into the sky, even though there was a similar impact in the sky. There was also the same impact in the sky, but the impact in the sky was clearly much weaker than on the ground. This also allowed Coltrane to escape death. Just then, a few more great demon lords appeared one after another. Perhaps because of this or that method, they didn't suffer any injuries, or they avoided the disaster with light injuries. Other than the heavily injured and dying lords, there were 8 great demon lords in total. These 8 greater demon overlords still had their full strength. By now, the 8 demon lords had surrounded Chen Zhao. Chapter 2602. Chen Zhao looked around. Lava demon Shane Kazlak was among the 8 demon lords. Chen Zhao was surprised that Shane Kazlak was unharmed. At least apart from his arm being shattered, he wasn't hurt at all. All the demon lords stared at Chen Zhao in shock and anger. He looked around at the black, barren land that was like a plain. The original volcano of despair disappeared, and so did the original mountain range. They were the only ones left. Only them. This kind of terrifying lethality was completely beyond their imagination. Even though they were demon lords, the power to destroy a country in an instant still terrified them. 5 of the greater demon overlords were unharmed, while the other 3 had minor injuries. The other 12 greater demon overlords were already on the verge of death. Some of them were just corpses. As for the others, there was no sign of them. They had been killed by Chen Zhao's meteors without even a speck left. However, the remaining 8 great demon lords clearly had the same hatred for Chen Zhao. After all, if Chen Zhao escaped, he'd be a huge problem in the future. Chen Zhao didn't have to do anything else. All he had to do was shoot at their territory. Their territory would be like Shane Kazlak's, returning to the state before liberation. 8 great demon overlords. Chen Zhao narrowed his eyes. He didn't think that he could face 8 demon lords at the same time. He'd thought that if he used his killer move, he might be able to kill Shane Kazlak and the other demon lords. But he'd underestimated the number of demon lords gathered at the volcano of despair. He'd also underestimated their trump cards. The current situation was very disadvantageous to him. Absolute freeze. Colin attacked first. Instantly, Chen Zhao felt his limbs lose the ability to move. His body was sealed in a block of ice. Chen Zhao even felt that all the cells in his body had lost the ability to move. Colin used his killer move right away. He had to use his full strength now. He'd hidden the truth just now. He'd been monitoring Chen Zhao, but hadn't told his companions. If the Lord Alpha were to find out about this, then he'd definitely die without a whole corpse. So he had to use his full strength now. He could show his attitude and lower his companions' suspicions. Chen Zhao panicked. They were indeed terrifyingly strong. No greater demon overlord could be underestimated. Chen Zhao's eyes widened. The flames of nirvana. As nirvana flames burned on Chen Zhao's body, nirvana flames also burned on the outside, burning the ice inside and outside at the same time. The greatest power of this absolute ice seal did not lie in its low temperature, but in its ability to cause a living being's bodily functions to lose their vitality in an extremely short period of time. However, the Nirvana's flame instantly activated the frozen cells. Chen Zhao quickly regained his mobility and smashed the ice with a punch. Chen Zhao pounced at Kalang. At this moment, Anfa Nelly launched his attack. Roar! A terrifying sound wave swept toward Chen Zhao. Instantly, Chen Zhao felt dizzy. Blood spurted out of his mouth, nose, and ears. The sound wave left a trench thousands of meters long on the ground. The ditch was as smooth as a mirror. Chen Zhao's skin was being torn apart by the sound wave. Chen Zhao tried his best to stay awake. At the same time, he created hundreds of black balls in the shortest time possible. Go! Bang, bang, bang. The black ball hit Anfa Nelly's body. Enduring the pain, Anfa Nelly temporarily stopped his sonic attack. However, the damage the black ball could do to Anfa Nelly was extremely limited. The wounds on Chen Zhao's body were also healing quickly. Just then, Chen Zhao felt an unbearably hot pain from his back. Looking back, he saw Shane Kazlak stabbing at him with a huge flaming sword. Chen Zhao immediately dodged Shane's attack. At the same time, he punched the flaming sword away. Just as he was about to punch again, a figure blocked Chen Zhao's way. It was a greater demon lord with muscles all over its body. His limbs were thick, and the bulging veins on his skin looked like old tree roots. The demon lord blocked Chen Zhao's fist with his arms. Although he managed to block Chen Zhao's punch, his feet still skidded hundreds of meters on the ground. Chen Zhao was surprised that someone could actually block his punch. However, the muscular demon greater lord was similarly shocked. Such terrifying strength. He'd actually lost to Chen Zhao in his area of expertise. Just then, an arrow shot toward Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao actually couldn't dodge the attack. In fact, he didn't even notice the attack before he was hit. From the corner of his eyes, Chen Zhao glanced at a tall and slender demon lord not far away. The demon lord's movements were quick and sharp. He held a curved bow in his hand. The arrow he shot didn't have any trajectory or aura. Chen Zhao could only determine the arrow's trajectory based on the direction the demon lord pulled the bow. However, when Chen Zhao dodged again, he found himself hit by another arrow. Troublesome, really troublesome. None of the 8 demon lords were easy to deal with. Moreover, the 8 demon lords had teamed up. This made Chen Zhao suffer even more. He couldn't continue like this. He had to end the battle quickly, or think of a way to escape. Now, the 8 demon lords didn't continue chasing. Instead, they repositioned themselves. They clearly planned to slowly exhaust Chen Zhao to death. This was a very good tactic. This could prevent Chen Zhao from fighting them to the death. Right now, Chen Zhao also needed to regroup. The enemy's temporary retreat gave him a chance to catch his breath. Suddenly, Chen Zhao realized that there were still remnants of the demon lord's power in the air. The owners of this power were all the demon lords that Chen Zhao had killed earlier. They hadn't completely dispersed. Instead, they lingered nearby. Chen Zhao realized that his small world could absorb this power much more easily than before. Glancing at the 8 demon lords, Chen Zhao absorbed the power without batting an eyelid. After a short period of recuperation, the 8 greater demon overlords attacked once more. However, this time, Chen Zhao wasn't in a hurry to succeed. Instead, he focused all his attention on dodging their attacks. The saying that a prolonged defense would lead to a loss was also useful for Chen Zhao. Before long, Chen Zhao was hit consecutively. However, Chen Zhao didn't fight back because of this. Instead, he patiently stalled for time. These attacks weren't weak, but they weren't fatal. Chen Zhao needed time to absorb the remaining power of the demon lords in the air. His small world was growing silently. The 8 demon lords didn't notice anything different. They were still working together to attack Chen Zhao. 9 Heavens, Divine Emperor. Chapter 2603. Right now, Qin Zhao looked like a cornered beast. Chen Zhao could dodge one attack from the 8 demon lords, but he couldn't dodge the other one. Plus, he'd used the life force he'd used to put himself on the brink of death with Meteor. In this battle, he'd used at least 1/10 of his total life force. One had to admit that the 8 demon lord strategy was very effective. They didn't need to use much energy at all. They could just trap Qin Zhao here until he died. The process was slightly longer, but they had time. At the moment, Qin Zhao was even calmer than them. The enormous power was evaporating in the air. Qin Zhao couldn't stop it. However, he needed to use time to absorb it. The power was the best nutrient. He didn't even have to break it down. Qin Zhao could let the small world absorb the power faster and more easily. Then it would turn into nutrients for the small world. Finally, all the power dissipating in the air was absorbed by Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao felt that his small world had tripled from its current foundation. What did tripling mean? It was about 30 times stronger than his original state. The diameter of the small world had reached 1,500 meters. It was time to counterattack. In an instant, Qin Zhao condensed tens of thousands of black balls in the small world. All of the greater demon lords were stunned. The next moment, tens of thousands of black balls shot toward the 8 demon lords from all directions. After all, not every greater demon overlord had powerful defenses. The tens of thousands of black balls were terrifyingly destructive. Qin Zhao even felt that the small world's power surpassed his own. Moreover, Qin Zhao's attacks were limited. However, the small world's attacks were freer and more convenient. The 8 demon lords hurriedly put up their magic shields or dodged Qin Zhao's attacks. Although the number of black balls was shocking, their individual attacks were still limited. They were all targeting the demon lords. So, the effect was still limited. It could hurt some of them, but it would only hurt them. It couldn't even hurt them heavily. However, the greatest use of this move wasn't to injure or kill the demon lords. If they were really so easy to kill, then Qin Zhao wouldn't have been in such a sorry state earlier. Qin Zhao's goal was only to stop their attacks and disrupt their formation. A white dwarf 10,000 times bigger than a normal black ball condensed around Qin Zhao. 2, 3, a total of 8 white dwarfs. With a wave of his hand, 8 white dwarfs shot toward the 8 demon lords. What followed was a terrifying explosion. At the same time, Qin Zhao also moved. He turned into a beam of white light and went straight for Shane Kazlak. Shane Kazlak had just used his flaming great sword to cut open the white dwarf. The impact of the white dwarf also covered Shane Kazlak in an instant. The terrifying impact almost tore Shane Kazlak's skin apart. The next moment, Qin Zhao appeared before Shane Kazlak. Qin Zhao was too fast, so fast that Shane Kazlak couldn't defend in time. Qin Zhao grabbed Shane Kazlak's flaming sword. Clang! Qin Zhao broke the flaming sword. Qin Zhao raised the broken blade of the flaming greatsword and slashed at Shane Kazlak. Crash! Before the blade could touch Shane Kazlak, his body suddenly turned into magma. Huge waves surged toward Qin Zhao. By then, the other demon lords had already dealt with their own problems, and all reached out to help. Qin Zhao could only retreat for now, sighing inwardly. As expected, none of the demon lords were easy to deal with. It was almost impossible to catch them off guard and kill any one of them in the shortest amount of time. Just then, Qin Zhao suddenly remembered that his dark magma had merged with magma before. He wondered if Shane Kazlak's magma could absorb it. The thought only flashed through his mind before Qin Zhao made a decision. In an instant, the dark magma directly covered the magma that Shane Kazlak had transformed into. 3 arrows shot toward him from behind. Qin Zhao didn't even look back, allowing them to hit him. Damn it, what is this? Shane Kazlak panicked. Shane Kazlak could feel his body dissolving bit by bit. He felt as if someone had stuffed him into a stomach bag. Actually, his feeling wasn't wrong. Qin Zhao had a lot of experience in devouring enemies, especially after his bloodline had completely merged. The dark magma also had the abilities of a glutton. In the past, the dark magma had devoured a lot of dark and depraved powers, so it was mostly black. But now, the dark magma started turning from speckles of red to a large area of red. Originally, it was mainly of the dark element, but after devouring Shane Kazlak, it started turning into the fire element. Qin Zhao directly put the dark magma back into his body. What flowed under his skin had turned into magma. Qin Zhao also realized that this new power in his body was especially compatible with the Nirvana flames. Absolute freeze! While Qin Zhao was still standing, Colin gave Qin Zhao an absolute freeze from behind. But this time, although Qin Zhao was frozen, he wasn't frozen like the first time. Qin Zhao moved his limbs and casually shattered the absolute freeze with a punch. Colin's expression changed because he felt the scorching aura from Qin Zhao's body. It was the aura he hated the most, just like Shane Kazlak's. Just then, Qin Zhao felt danger. The archer had inadvertently set up a magic array. Qin Zhao wasn't unfamiliar with this. Seal. Without thinking, Qin Zhao turned into a stream of light. Back then, when he'd faced Leviathan Aberantagemus, he'd almost sealed Qin Zhao as a mere lord of the demons. If it was this time, there were so many lords. Once the seal was activated, Qin Zhao wouldn't have any chance to turn the tables. So, Qin Zhao definitely wouldn't give them the chance. Stop him. Hurry. Don't let him leave my magic array. The bow-wielding, great lord bellowed. The strength-type demon lord stood in front of Qin Zhao. Don't even think about going anywhere. The strength-type demon lord roared, lowering his fists. But this time, Qin Zhao didn't choose to fight head-on. Instead, he took out the black trident the moment the strength-type demon lord came into contact with him. The strength-type demon lord raised his fist and smashed it at Qin Zhao. He clearly didn't realize that danger was approaching. Qin Zhao directly stabbed the black trident into the body of the strength-type demon lord. The demon lord's eyes widened, and he stared at the black trident in his chest in shock. Before he could react, Qin Zhao had already punched and crushed his head. He grabbed the body of the strength-type demon lord and stuffed it into his spatial ring. The remaining 6 demon lords were all enraged. Chapter 2604. They didn't understand how Qin had done it. He had killed a greater demon lord in an instant, but this made them feel a strong sense of danger. Qin didn't plan to stay any longer, even though he had devoured Shane Kazlak through the dark lava. Moreover, Shi Feng had caught the demon lord off guard and killed the demon lord. But there were still 6 greater demon lords here. Every one of them was terrifyingly powerful. He could kill 2 in a row, but that didn't mean he still had a chance. Plus, if he continued to stay, he might not even be able to kill a single one. Instead, he would be killed. If it was a one-on-one, Qin was confident that he could kill any one of them, but they wouldn't give him such a chance. Even with the black trident, it would be difficult for Qin to have the same opportunity. The black trident would make them wary, but at the same time, it would make them greedy. Qin wouldn't give them such a chance. Qin glanced at his surroundings. The small world swept up the heavily injured and the corpses of the greater demon lords and ran away without any warning. The remaining 6 greater demon overlords looked at each other in confusion. None of them chased after Qin. After thinking for a while, they realized that it wasn't Qin who had killed the greater demon lord in an instant. It was the black trident in Qin's hand. That thing was indeed a supreme treasure, but it would probably be a death sentence. Plus, Qin wasn't a kind person. He would wait for them to kill him. This was an enemy even more ferocious than they were. None of them had the confidence to kill Qin. Plus, they didn't trust each other enough. Actually, if they had been willing to give up everything and cooperate with Qin, Qin wouldn't have been able to escape now. It was because they were wary and suspicious of each other. That was why Qin had the chance to counterattack and even break through their alliance. Chen didn't swagger away. Instead, he hid his aura and headed toward Obsidian City. This place was very far from Obsidian City. Along the way, Chen first killed the few dying demons and stored their corpses in his spatial ring. Otherwise, it wouldn't be convenient. After flying for a full 4 hours, Chen finally approached Obsidian City. Just then, he saw a huge figure appear in the distance. Chen immediately returned from his energy form to his physical form. Iris. Chen, it's you? Iris thought that it was an enemy. She could only sense a terrifying aura approaching, but she was unable to identify the other party. Now, she and Beelzebub Sophie were already frightened by the mere twang of a bow, although they had just won a match not too long ago. They occupied the territories of the three-headed devil and the red eagle, as well as a large amount of resources. But this also caused the wrath of their enemy, King Alpha. Although the two of them were considered to be at the peak of the greater demon overlords, they were still inferior to the demon overlords. But it was impossible to resist the Alpha Demon King. The 30-plus greater demon overlords under him could easily slaughter them. Iris, let me rest in the castle for a while, Chen said. Although he was in a good state now, the previous high-intensity battle still made his mind tense, and his body was not very comfortable. Iris nodded. Get on my back. Iris brought Chen into Obsidian Castle. Who summoned you? You seem to have just been through a battle. Where's Sophie? Some unfamiliar demons are approaching the border of our territory, Iris said. Sophie went to check the situation. She was the only one guarding Obsidian Castle now. This was why she was so nervous earlier. What's wrong with you? Chen took out his spoils of war, the corpses of greater demon overlords. Big ones, small ones, all of different shapes. Iris was shocked and took 2 steps back. Her eyes were filled with horror. I came to hell to find a greater demon overlord to solve some personal problems, but I accidentally barged into their gathering. After a fight, I killed a few and escaped. This is Shane Kazlak's Balrog sword. This is the helmet of the dead. It's from the Nether Tower. This is Morgate's head. How many greater demon overlords did you kill? I don't know the exact number, but my victory was very unexpected. In fact, they gathered together and didn't stop me from releasing my ultimate skill. That's why I succeeded. Chan was very sure that if they had stopped him from releasing his ultimate skill, the best outcome would have been for Chen to run away with his tail between his legs. Suddenly, Iris picked up a red token. Her expression changed drastically again. This is Demon King Alpha's Crimson Token. Iris thought that she had already seen a lot of things, but at this moment she really felt a chill. It could be said that she had watched Chen grow up step by step. She had never thought that one day Chen would grow to where he was today. Perhaps Chen wasn't powerful enough for her to look up to, but Chen's results were definitely enough to shock her. What's this thing for? Wait, I'll tell Sophie to come back, Iris said solemnly. When Sophie discovered the signal sent by Iris, he thought that there was an enemy invasion in his territory. After all, he and Iris had agreed to use the signal only if there was a catastrophic problem in his territory. However, when Sophie returned, he found that Obsidian City was peaceful. There didn't seem to be any signs of war. Moreover, Iris's aura didn't seem to be in any danger. Beelzebub Sophie returned to Obsidian Castle. He immediately noticed that Chen was beside Iris. Chen, why are you here? Sophie, take a look at this. Iris handed the crimson token to Beelzebub Sophie. In an instant, Beelzebub Sophie's eyes were filled with shock and doubt. What the hell is going on? My spoils of war, one of them. I want to know what exactly happened. The more details, the better. Jen told Iris and Beelzebub Sophie everything that had happened, apart from hiding the identity of the handsome guy who had summoned him and some details of the battle. He didn't hide anything else. However, after Beelzebub, Sophie, and Iris heard Chen's statement, their expressions froze. You're saying that you killed nearly 30 greater demon lords? Actually, there were only 2 who were truly killed. Chapter 2605. Chen Zhao was confident, but he wasn't arrogant yet. Although Shi Feng had killed nearly 30 greater demon overlords, the demon overlords were still far stronger than the demon overlords. But in reality, he'd only killed 2 in a head-on battle. Meteorite was his trump card, but it wasn't his true combat power. Moreover, the requirements to use meteorite were too strict. Beelzebub, Zophi, played with the red token. Even though he was just listening to Chen Zhao's description, both the husband and wife were shaken to the core. It was hard to imagine that he'd fought 8 demon lords. Not only that, but he also killed 2 of them and escaped safely with the spoils of war. How difficult would it be? I have use for this red token, Zophi said. I'll use the wealth of almost 30 demon lords to exchange for it. Wait, are you mistaken? I killed those greater demon overlords, and you're using their wealth to exchange for my spoils of war? You killed them, but how are you going to get their wealth? You can't even find their territory, let alone their wealth. Their wealth won't automatically become yours just because you killed their master, but I can. What's this red token for? Chen Zhao asked. Using the wealth of 30 demon lords to exchange for this red token. This could only mean that the value of this crimson token was much higher than the wealth of 30 greater demon overlords. So, Chen Zhao was very curious about the value of this token. This is the token of the secondary demon king I'm going to deal with. It also contains his power. As long as I have this token, his subordinates won't be able to attack me unless I attack them first. And the secondary demon king isn't allowed to attack you directly, so you'll be undefeatable, right? Chen Zhao immediately understood Zophi's intentions. Not only that, I can also study that secondary demon king's power. I can even absorb it and find a better way to counter him. Zophi had to admit that Chen Zhao had given him too many surprises. How difficult would it be to defeat and replace a secondary demon king? That was almost impossible to succeed. Perhaps Zophi's subconscious thought was that he couldn't succeed. He thought that he couldn't succeed. Ambition had driven him to this step. But it didn't mean that he believed he could do it. He was not the first demon lord to attempt to replace the lesser demon king. However, in the past tens of thousands of years, only one greater demon overlord had successfully become a lesser demon king. Beelzebub, Zophi, even felt that he was just one of the many losers who kept failing. He had even made up his mind. But Chen Zhao had given him hope of turning the tables. Before he could face the lesser demon king, there was still an insurmountable mountain. There were the 30 or so greater demon overlords under the lesser demon king. As long as these 30-plus greater demon overlords existed, the demon overlords would not be able to escape. Then, he would never be able to face the lesser demon king. It seemed that the situation he was facing was despair. There was no way he could fight against the alliance of more than 30 greater demon lords. Unless these 30-plus greater demon overlords were willing to send them off one by one. Was that even possible? Impossible, no one was a fool. However, Chen Zhao's appearance this time had directly destroyed the alliance of more than 30 demon lords under the secondary demon king's command. Moreover, he even brought him a crimson token. This red token turned Beelzebub, Zophi, from a passive situation to an active one. Due to the restrictions of the rules, the lesser demon king could not directly attack Beelzebub, Zophi. Moreover, because of Chen Zhao's massacre, only a single digit remained of the 30 greater demon lords. This greatly weakened the lesser demon king's power. The level of a lesser demon king's power was related to the number of greater demon lords under him. Moreover, the remaining greater demon lords could not directly attack Beelzebub Zophi with the crimson token. This meant that as long as Beelzebub Zophi was willing, he could choose to attack at any time. Of course, the crimson token could only maintain a situation where he would not be defeated. It was not a hope of victory. He had to face a lesser demon king. A crimson token was far from being able to change the outcome. Of course, even so, it was still enough to make Beelzebub Sophie excited. "Oh, your alchemist subordinate already has results. I was going to summon you a few days ago, but you came yourself. Take me to see his results." Felt Nightake knew about Chun Zhao's arrival. At the entrance of his alchemy lab, he waited respectfully for Chun Zhao's arrival. When he saw Chun Zhao, he walked quickly and knelt on one knee to welcome Chun Zhao. "Great master, thank you for coming." If a normal person spoke to Chun Zhao like this and knelt on one knee, Chun Zhao would only think that there was something wrong with this person. However, this was hell and Felt Nightake was a demon. Everything was as it should be. "I heard that you've already made the magic potion I needed." "Yes, I've completed the Divine Power Potion. Please forgive me for naming it on my own." "Divine Power Potion? Does it really have such an effect?" "Please follow me." Felt Nightake brought Chun Zhao into the lab. There was a crystal container with a diameter of 2 meters and a height of 3 meters. The crystal container was filled with colorful liquid, like melted glass, slowly flowing in the container. The colors were so bright that Chun Zhao was dazzled. "Don't tell me this is the Divine Power Potion you were talking about." "Yes, Master. This is the Divine Power Potion." "How do I drink it? How much does it work?" "Master, it's actually not for drinking," Felt Nightake said. "It's for soaking. Soak your body in the Divine Power Potion and let the power contained in the potion seep into your body," said Felt Nightake. "How much can it increase my power?" "Master, this Divine Power Potion can't increase your power." "Are you kidding me?" "Master, the Divine Power Potion's true function is to improve your power, starting from the most basic power to the most advanced strengthening spell you've mastered. If you can use all your power perfectly, this Divine Power Potion will be useless to you. If there's even the slightest flaw in your power magic system, the Divine Power Potion will help you understand and perfect it." Divine King of the Nine Heavens. Chapter 2606. Just soak it. You just need to soak it. Of course, you can also drink it, but it doesn't taste very good. Moreover, it can be used repeatedly after a certain period of time. If you drink it, it can only be used once. "Can I take it away directly?" Chun Zhao asked. Of course. In fact, Fate Nitak had created this container for the sake of beauty and convenience. Other than making the Divine Power Potion, Chun Zhao had to be perfect in other aspects. After taking the Divine Power Potion, Chun Zhao bid farewell to Beelzebub, Sophie, and Iris. His time in hell had come to an end. Chun Zhao also brought some local specialties from hell back. When he returned to the human world, Chun Zhao received a call from Alex. "Chin, where have you been these past 2 days? You weren't in the service area when I called you. I called Fei Lai and she said you had something urgent, but she didn't tell me where you went. I thought you were kidnapped." Before going to hell, Chun Zhao had only told Fei Lai. Chun Zhao was about to explain when Alex interrupted him. But Alex interrupted him again. "Forget it. But even if you're kidnapped, please let the kidnappers go or deal with it yourself. I have too many things on my hands right now. I don't have time to deal with such a small matter." Chun Zhao nodded. "Is it a small matter to you that I was kidnapped? Everyone's time is precious. Are you willing to spend it on kidnappers, or use it to make money?" "Fine. Compared to money, kidnapping is indeed a small matter." Chun Zhao shrugged. "Why are you looking for me?" "It's about the contract between you and Ms. Jane Fankel. We've mostly settled it. Now, we just need your signature." "What time?" "It's best if it's now." "Now. Don't you want to reschedule?" "I've already said that my time is precious." "Your time is precious as well. Her time is just as precious." "Fine. Now give me the address. Drive a good car to pick me up." "I'll go with you." "Oh, you have to change." Chun Zhao returned home. After changing, he drove a luxury car. Chen Zhao didn't really like driving his new Rolls-Royce Phantom. However, this car was indeed very suitable for decoration. Compared to a flashy supercar, a sedan was more suitable for a formal occasion. He'd gotten the latest Rolls-Royce Phantom not long ago. It was a gift from Amira. When Chen Zhao arrived at Alex's law firm, she even found one of her subordinates to be their driver for the time being. In Alex's words, people of their status needed a full-time chauffeur, especially in formal occasions. The status of those who drove themselves would drop by a notch. This had nothing to do with wealth, but a matter of style. Chen Zhao didn't mind, but he still respected Alex's suggestion. Sitting in the back seat, Alex handed him a document. This is Madame Jane Fankel's message. Take a look. Is she only 45? Chen Zhao asked, confused. He had thought that Lady Jane Arunkel would be a little older than him. Yes, is there a problem? Didn't you say that when she was in the 90s, she launched the biggest merger of the last century? At that time, she was not even 20 years old, right? To be precise, she's 19. Chen Zhao gasped. 19? What was he still doing? Spending all night in internet cafes with his roommates. She was already a force to be reckoned with in the financial market. She was the youngest recipient of a master's degree from Yale University's Department of Finance. At the age of 16, she began to get involved in the family business. At the age of 18, she officially took over the Caribbean Empire Cruise Line. At the age of 19, she reached the most glorious moment of her career. Although nothing similar happened in the following 20 years, the Caribbean Empire Cruise Line successfully became the world's #1 cruise line in her hands. The car drove into a luxurious manner. Along the way, there were many well-equipped men in black. This doesn't look like a rich manor. It looks more like a mafia family's nest, right? Alex seemed to know what Chen Zhao was going to say. What's her background? The Marx family from Italy. Almost all the information about her that's circulated around the world has concealed her surname. Her full name should be Jane Fankel Marx. After the car stopped, a man in black walked up to open the door for Chen Zhao. Are you sure that Madame Jane Arunkel won't resort to other means to sign an unfair contract with us? It's an era where capital rules. If she still does business the way her family did in the past, she wouldn't have been able to develop Caribbean Empire Cruise Line to its current scale. Alex had interacted with all kinds of people, so she knew this very well. Every industry had its own rules. It seemed like the mafia was very scary. However, if they tried to clear their names, they would follow the rules more than others once they chose to enter a certain industry. Because they needed to clear their names, they couldn't use the same methods as before. This was their choice. Chen Zhao finally met Jane Fankel. Perhaps it was because of her meticulous makeup and matching of her clothes. Jane Fankel looked younger than in her photos. Hello, Mr. Chen. Jane Fankel extended her hand with a smile. Hello, Ms. Fankel. Welcome. Please come in. The two entered the living room with Jane Fankel's invitation. It looked like a scene from The Godfather that Chen Zhao had seen before. It had a very European style of decoration and solid wood furniture. After the two sat down, Alex spoke. Ms. Fankel, shall we go straight to the topic? Of course, Mr. Chen. Is that okay? Jane Fankel nodded, but then she looked at Chen Zhao. Meeting Jane Fankel's gaze, Chen Zhao said, My history is more like winning the lottery. I don't know anything about finance, so I leave most of my business to professionals. Alex is one of the most professional people. Of course, we all know how smart and capable Alex is, but this also has to do with Mr. Chen's trust. You flatter me, Chen Zhao said, smiling. Jane Fankel waved her finger behind her. One of her subordinates passed a bound document to Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao, on the other hand, pushed it in front of Alex. Divine King of the Nine Heavens. Chapter 2607. It wasn't Alex's first time reading a contract. However, She still read it very seriously. However, after looking at it for a moment, Alex frowned. Ms. Fankel, did you take the wrong contract? Stunned, Jane Fankel asked, What's wrong? This contract is different from what we agreed on. It's also not the source document I saw the other day. Jane Fankel furrowed her brows. Help me point out what's different. Take a look. Here, in these 3 places. If my boss signs this contract, then my boss won't be selling the shares to you. He'll be giving you the shares and paying you $2 billion. Alex's expression was also very ugly. After all, she'd just promised that the other party wouldn't be so unruly. In the blink of an eye, she'd encountered such an unruly situation. After Jane Fankel made sure the contract wasn't the same as the one she had read before, her face turned pale. I'm very sorry, Mr. Chen, Ms. Alex. This is due to my negligence. I took the wrong contract. I'll give the original contract to Mr. Chen as soon as possible. At the same time, we'll increase the price by 5%. What do you think, Mr. Chen? Chen Zhao looked at Alex to see what her plan was. All right then, but I hope there won't be such a mistake next time. Chen Zhao and Alex stood up and prepared to leave. But just then, the black-clothed man at the door crossed his arms and blocked Alex and Chen Zhao's way. Chen Zhao turned around and looked at Jane Fankel. Ms. Fankel, can you explain what this means? Jane Fankel's shocked face was also tinged with anger. AMU, Tansk, what are you doing? Just then, AMU, who had slicked-back hair, said, Miss, we're now under Mr. Caesar's orders. Sorry. Caesar? You're under him? What can he give you? Jane Fankel was both shocked and furious. Caesar? Her useless brother? If he was even a little bit capable, he wouldn't have made her his heir. Mr. Max agreed yesterday that Mr. Caesar will be his successor, and at the same time he will hand over all power to Mr. Caesar. In other words, from then on, all of us will automatically be loyal to Mr. Caesar. Impossible! How could father make such a decision? Jan Fankel's face was filled with disbelief. By now, Chen Zhao was getting impatient. He looked at Jane Fankel. I don't care about your family ethics. We just want to get out of here. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen. First, you need to sign this contract before you can leave. The lawyer who had been standing behind Jane Fankel suddenly spoke. What if I don't? Chen Zhao asked calmly. Then I'm afraid you won't be able to leave here today. Just then, AMU and Tansk pointed their guns at the back of Chen Zhao's head. Chen Zhao glanced at Alex from the corner of his eye. She nodded secretly. The two of them seemed to be communicating something. What? Chen Zhao sneered. Pointing a gun at your partner's head is how you cooperate? Jane Fankel was trembling with rage. She had been in the industry for almost 30 years. She had never been humiliated like this before. But this time, she didn't even have a chance to retort. She wasn't angry at Chen Zhao's accusations and humiliation. She was angry at her own brother for doing such a despicable thing. If today's incident got out, then she and the business empire that she had built would be destroyed in a day. The bigger a company was, the more they cared about their reputation. Pointing a gun at someone's head and forcing them to sign a contract? This was unforgivable at any time. What would the regular tourists think? What would the shareholders of the company think? Chandler, did you change the contract too? Boss, I'm sorry, Chandler said calmly. Mr. Max also arranged for me to stay with you. Chun Zhao looked at Alex. Is that enough? Yes. Alex took out a portable recorder. That's enough to prove that you were acting in self-defense. AMU and Tansk suddenly realized that Chen Zhao had disappeared before them. The next moment, AMU felt a heavy kick on his back. Then he flew into the air. He didn't die, but Chen Zhao had broken his spine. Lying on the ground, his body was twisted. His upper body kept struggling, but his lower body didn't move at all. Startled, Tansk suddenly raised his gun and turned. But before he could aim at Chen Zhao Qin Zhao had already broken Tansk's wrist with one hand. Then he pointed the gun at Tansk's shoulder. Bang, bang, bang. Ah! Alex closed her eyes and turned around. Please don't make it too bloody. The suit I'm wearing costs $30,000. Qin Zhao didn't make it too bloody. He didn't even kill anyone. After all, his suit was expensive too. It was inconvenient to move around in a suit. Casual clothes were more comfortable. Ms. Fankel, you've ruined my rare chance to wear a suit. At this moment, the men in black who were scattered around the manor ran over after hearing the gunshots. Jane Fankel walked to the door with a furious expression. Put away your guns. Mr. Qin, I'll give you an explanation. Jane Fankel didn't have the face to talk about cooperation anymore. If she couldn't give Qin Zhao a satisfactory answer, their family's huge business empire would also sink into oblivion. Jane Fankel stood at the door and looked at the men in black who hadn't put down their guns. You better know what you're doing. If you put down your guns now, I'll pretend this never happened. But if you reject my good intentions, you better think about your wives and children. Jane Fankel was born in a mafia family. Her father was a godfather. She'd been influenced by some things since she was young. She wasn't a white lotus. She'd seen more bloodshed than even a soldier who'd been to the battlefield. What my father and brother can give you, I can also give you and more. Jane Fankel had controlled the Caribbean Empire cruise line for more than 20 years. She was not someone who could be dismissed just because of the title of godfather. If she wanted to, she could directly starve her family. This wasn't a joke. And this time, she wasn't joking either. She was really angry. Chapter 2608. The men in black lowered their guns one after another. Once there was a first, there would be a second. Even these people would follow blindly. Some of them were Jane Fankel's trusted followers. Thus, they were the first to lower their guns. Mr. Qin, please give me 3 days. Sure. If you can give me a satisfactory answer in 3 days, we'll continue working together. Then Qin Zhao and Alex drove away. In the car, Qin Zhao asked, Alex, do you think she directed it herself? Alex shook her head. She wouldn't gamble with her company's reputation. After a pause, Alex added, I thought you'd kill someone. I've always been a pacifist. Alex glanced at Qin Zhao in disdain. After returning home, Portia stayed at home to take care of the kids. However, Qin Zhao realized that his long-absent assistant, Zephyra, was also there. Zephyr, you're back? When did you come back? Boss, Zephyr greeted Qin Zhao with a smile. Zephyra, did you go on a mission in the past few days? Portia was very curious about Zephyra's deeds. You definitely don't want to know the whole process. Zephyra still had a faint smile on her face. Did you kill someone? Zephyra hesitated. She glanced at Qin Zhao silently and then nodded. Wow, impressive. Portia's passion had been ignited. After all, she had a normal life and desired to live a life beyond that. Her mind automatically filled in the gaps of Zephyra's passionate life. No matter what kind of bloody storm Zephyra was facing outside, he did not care. Here, Zephyra was just an ordinary girl, hardworking and approachable. After lunch, Zephyr sat by the lake and dipped her bare feet into the water. Unlike the turbulent life outside, the life here made her feel peaceful and tranquil. Qin Zhao brought a glass of juice to Zephyra. Is it resolved? Zephyra hesitated for a moment and then shook her head. What's the situation this time? An extremely ferocious demonic dragon has massacred more than 10 human villages. He's extremely cunning. There's no pattern to the targets he chooses. He chooses them completely randomly, and they're very far away from each other. After he finishes massacring a village, he immediately leaves. My team members and I have been hunting him for a few months, and we've only encountered him once. Even if he has absolute strength, he won't come into direct contact with us. His footprints are all over the 5 continents. His actions should have angered the entire spirit world, right? This situation is no longer a dragon slayer's task. Are you willing to help? I really want to, but he didn't enter my territory, Qin Zhao said. In the spirit world, those who have the strength to do so all have the same thoughts as you. Only a few hot-headed spiritualists fantasized about the great cause of slaying dragons and gathered together to fight against the demonic dragon. They heavily injured the demonic dragon, while their entire army was annihilated. We, the dragon slayers, weren't able to make it in time for that battle. Chen Zhao could hear the complaint in Refra's voice. It seemed to be very dissatisfied with a master like Chen Zhao. He clearly had the ability to solve the problem, but he just stood by. Forget it. This is the last time, I think, that I've already quit the Dragon Slayers. If it's your request, I can help you once, Qin Zhao said. Refra lowered her head and thought for a long time. Are you really willing to help? Yes. Please help me destroy that demonic dragon. Sure. Tell me the demonic dragon's whereabouts. I'll pay close attention to it. As soon as I get accurate information, I'll tell you immediately. Okay. Also, can you bring me with you? I want to kill that demonic dragon with my own hands. Other than hatred and honor, is there any other reason? For us dragon slayers, there are some things that we can never erase, such as the dragon slayer mark. Refra lifted a dragon tattoo on her arm. It exuded the aura of the dragon race. It was very faint, but it was real. Every dragon slayer is actually a descendant of the dragon race. It's just that it's almost impossible for us to activate the dragon race's bloodline. However, we can temporarily borrow the power of the dragon race by bathing in dragon blood. Zephyr rolled down her sleeves. If the conditions allow, I can agree to it. Refra had quit the Dragon Slayer organization, but it wasn't difficult for her to obtain information about the Dragon Slayers. After all, a lot of information was shared among the Dragon Slayers. Even though she had left the Dragon Slayer organization, she could still obtain the corresponding information through her former companions. But I don't believe there's such a crazy dragon, Chen Zhao said. From his actions, he's an extremely calm dragon. He doesn't only know how to kill. Killing for the sake of killing isn't in line with human nature. Human nature didn't just refer to a person's personality. It was the nature of all intelligent races. If the other was a violent dragon who didn't know how to think, he might only kill to satisfy his desires. But he was a dragon who could escape from the dragon slayers and the entire spiritual world many times. He didn't seem like an idiot who did things recklessly. I think he definitely has his own goal, but he hasn't revealed it yet. We've suspected that he has other goals, but we haven't found out yet. Chen Zhao rubbed his chin and thought for a long time. His purpose in doing this is completely like the action of a lunatic. However, he is not a lunatic. His seemingly clueless actions might be because he has put his purpose out in the open, but it has been ignored by everyone. Zephyr frowned. On the surface, you mean his goal is to provoke the entire spiritual world. That's the only possibility I can think of. What's in it for him? Does he want to die? Maybe. I'm not a smart person either. These are just my guesses. Chen Zhao had limited information, so his guesses were also very limited. But he still believed that this wasn't an irrational killing. Chen Zhao still had the perspective of profit. The smarter a person was, the less they would do irrational things. If the other party was a giant dragon above the dragon clan, then he would definitely choose a more reliable method. If they wanted to overthrow the rule of the humans, it was far from enough to just rely on killing. At least normal killing couldn't overthrow the rule of humans. Chapter 2609. The Marx family originated from Sicily. They immigrated to the United States in the 1920s. Then they took root here and made their first fortune by relying on the bloody accumulation of primitive blood. Prohibition in the United States gave them a chance to rise. In fact, most of the reason why the American Mafia was rampant today was because of the prohibition. Most of the Mafia relied on Z's private alcoholic beverages to rise to power. In the era of Prohibition, it was also the era when the mafia was at its most rampant. How rampant were they? They shot the judge in front of the court in broad daylight. The gunman was not punished. Instead, he sent a letter to the judge. He regarded it as a glorious achievement. If the current American politics was controlled by the capitalists, then the American political system was dominated by capitalists. In the past, the American politics was controlled by the mafia, although the United States had cleaned up the chaos several times. Even today, the mafia problem in the United States had not been solved, because the mafia was deeply rooted in society. Of course, in the 1960s and 1970s, there were a group of clear-headed families. There were also a group of clear-headed families who knew that this path could not be walked to the end. These families worked hard to clean up their families. That was the case with the Marx family. It was under this situation that Jane Fankel's father took over the family, but he was limited by the vision and reputation of the previous generation. So, Jane Fankel's father did not achieve much, but he had laid a very good foundation for Jane Funkel. Jane Fankel was the representative of the mafia descendants in the new era. Father, I want to know why. I've already brought the family out of the swamp, but your decision has plunged the family back into the swamp. If you can't give me a satisfactory answer, I might very well correct your mistake myself. Jane Fankel tried her best to speak calmly and slowly, but her suppressed anger and confusion could still be heard in her voice. Old Marx was silent for a while on the other end of the phone. Then he said in a deep voice, I am just correcting the mistakes of the past. Mistakes? What mistakes? We are the mafia. We are born to walk in the dark, not fantasize about how to dance in the sun. Jan Fankel couldn't believe that her father would say such a thing. Back then, he stood his ground and led the family to give up those shameful businesses. Old Marx was dedicated to cleaning up the family's reputation. Why would he say such a thing? Do you know what you are talking about? Jan Fankel's face turned gloomy. Of course I know what I'm talking about, but what about you? Do you know who you're talking to? Or do you think you can talk to your father like this just because you've made some achievements? All right, I'm sorry, Father. I was wrong. Jane Fankel's tone grew colder and colder. In the next instant, her tone changed, and she suddenly said, This should be the last time I call you Father. You want to sever ties with me? Who gave you the courage to make such a stupid decision? I don't want to sever ties with you. I want to sever ties with my family. Now, I want you to apologize immediately. Sorry, Mr. Marx, I refuse your request. Fankel, you've made a stupid decision. Old Max's tone turned cold. No, you made a stupid decision. Looks like I need to let you know how stupid your decision is. Old Max said coldly. Looks like we have a big disagreement. Then, our communication ends here. Jan Fankel hung up the phone and turned to a tall man with paint on his face. I'll leave the rest to you. They were now outside the headquarters of the Marx family. Behind Jan Fankel and Ayer was a group of fully armed mercenaries. Jan Fankel had spent a lot of money to hire them. Jan Fankel handed Ayer 2 photos. These 2, I want you to ensure their safety. The 2 people in the photos were her father, Old Max, and her younger brother, Caesar Max. She planned to use her power to destroy the Marx family. She would play the role of the family gravedigger. At the same time, she would use her power to teach her father and her brother a lesson. What was the power of capital? In the face of the power of capital, all the glory and prestige of the family in the past would become worthless. There were about 100 people in this mercenary legion, and they were not just individually strong. They also had the most advanced weapons. Each of them was equipped with enough equipment to shoot at 30 enemies for 30 minutes. Ayer took the photos and glanced at them, revealing his white teeth. I'll try my best, but I can't guarantee anything. There would always be some employer who would make a request before the war. However, Ayer would ignore most of the requests. Their mission was not to save people, but to kill. They were enemies. Before he could ensure that they put down their weapons, he would not agree to Jan Fankel's request. The mercenaries easily tore through the Marx family's defensive line. The people inside the Marx family could not even communicate with the outside world by phone. The mercenaries had already turned the place into a restricted area with interference devices. Jan Fankel looked at the once familiar home, which was now engulfed in the flames of war. She did not plan to kill her father and brother. She just wanted them to not be a hindrance. However, given her father and brother's way of doing things, they would never allow her to leave the family's control. That was why Jan Fankel chose to make the first move. Before the two of them could even react, he had uprooted them and the Marx family. Jan Fankel was from the Marx family. That was why she knew the Marx family better than anyone else. Meanwhile, in the Marx family, Caesar and old Marx were standing in front of a window on the third floor. Both of them looked at the chaos below expressionlessly. They watched as their family's gunmen retreated step by step. Neither of them was worried or afraid. Caesar glanced at his father and said, "It seems that Jan Fankel does not know her family well enough. This is a chance for her to understand that compared to the entire family, her achievements are nothing. Nothing at all," Yuzichin said with a smile. At this time, a voice came from behind them. "I can give her a chance, but that depends on her performance." Chapter 2610. How's the situation inside? Jane Fankel asked. "It's going well, although we encountered quite a bit of resistance," Ayer said disapprovingly. Although they were facing a well-known mafia family, their combat power was not on the same level. The difference in equipment was not something that could be made up for with numbers. Especially the difference in equipment. It was not something that could be made up for with numbers. In this battle, no tactics could make up for the difference in equipment between the two sides. One side was still using pistols, while the other side was equipped with automatic machine guns. There were also several heavy machine guns mounted on the off-road vehicles. They followed their team members into the manor. This was no longer a battle. It was a one-sided massacre. Jane Fankel's heart was heavy, leading an army to massacre her own family. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't feel happy about it. She hoped that her father could see the situation clearly. He could surrender quickly. That way, she could reduce the number of deaths she caused. However, so many of her family members had already been killed. He did not seem to want to surrender. Since when did her father become so unyielding? Or could it be that she had misjudged him? "It shouldn't take long before you can go in," Ayer said. I hope so," Jane Fankel said, trying her best to calm herself down. At that moment, the mafia gunmen outside the manor had been completely cleared out. The gunshots inside the manor also died down after a few grenades exploded. "Guild leader, the enemies inside the manor have basically been cleared out. Through thermal imaging, there are still 3 people inside the manor. They are all under our control. Should we execute them on the spot?" Before Ayer could speak, Jane Fankel hurriedly shouted, "No, no need. My employer and I will go in now. You just need to be on guard." Ayer looked at Jane Fankel. "Let's go, Madame Fankel." With a heavy heart, Jane Fankel returned to the home she had grown up in. Ayer smiled. He had seen too many employers like her who were filled with worries. Jane Fankel was not the first, and she would not be the last. Because of some ridiculous reason, she had broken up with her family. Then she would find them and use violence to convince them. When Jane Fankel entered the manor, she could not help but regret her decision. She looked at the corpses all over the place. She even knew the names of some of them. Now, however, she had buried them with her own hands. They might not be related by blood, but they became a family because of the same surname. Jane Fankel's feelings were getting more complicated. Some of the corpses could no longer be seen clearly. Every scene here was filled with memories for Jane Fankel. At this moment, the mercenary standing at the door cleverly ran to Ayer. "Leader, there seems to be a problem." "What's wrong?" "The people I sent into the villa have all disappeared." "Disappeared? What does that mean?" "They've all disappeared from the thermal imaging equipment, and there's no response from their walkie-talkies." "Is it signal interference? And there's even a temperature disturbance?" Ayer asked with a frown. He had encountered a similar situation on the battlefield before. By lowering the temperature of the environment, the enemy was affecting the thermal imaging equipment. Lowering the ambient temperature seemed complicated. In fact, it wasn't that difficult to do, especially in the interior of the building. As long as a portion of the ice was placed, the ambient temperature could be easily lowered to a point where even thermal imaging instruments could not detect it. Where are the enemies? There are 3 people in the villa. Their thermal imaging is very clear, and they have been in the last room on the 3rd floor. They haven't moved at all. "Gather our men and follow me in," Ayer said with a sour expression. He had thought it would be a simple mission. However, the reality had exceeded his expectations. "What about outside?" "There are no more enemies outside, so we don't need to station our men outside." "Let's go in and see what kind of monsters are inside." "I want to go with you." Jane Fankel looked at Ayer with a serious expression. "Ms. Fankel, I don't have time to protect you." "I don't need your protection." Jane Fankel was worried that the mercenaries had gone berserk. She might not care about the others, but she would not allow her father and brother to be harmed. "Fine, but you better not get in the way of the battle." Soon, Ayer's men were gathered. The villa was huge, and a single living room could fit a dozen mercenaries. The group carefully entered the villa. When they reached the living room, it was empty. There was nothing, not even a body. "Something isn't right," Ayer said with a frown. A few mercenaries in charge of scouting ahead gestured to Ayer. "The 2nd floor is safe. We can go up." The mercenaries went up to the 2nd floor, one after another. Jane Fankel walked in the middle. That way, if anything happened, she would be the first to be protected. However, when they reached the 2nd floor and were about to go up to the 3rd floor, they saw a door in front of them. Jane Fankel frowned at the strange door. The door was engraved with obscure and complicated patterns. The main part of the pattern was a giant dragon, spreading 3 waves of fear and despair to the world. Below the dragon were people kneeling on the ground, shivering. "Why is there a door like this here?" Jane Fankel was confused. There shouldn't be a door like this in a place like this. It wasn't some kind of art piece. Even if it was, it should be in her father's study or collection room. Ayer signaled his men and forced their way in. One of the mercenaries went up and kicked the door. With a bang, the strange door was kicked open. Then, a cloud of smoke spread out from the door. "Careful, it might be poisonous gas," Ayer said, covering his nose. However, after a while, the mercenaries realized the smoke wasn't poisonous at all. At least, they didn't feel anything unusual. "Let's go up and have a look. Stay alert." Al sensed that the villa was filled with a strange and indescribable pressure. He didn't like this place. If he had a choice, he would rather be on the battlefield than in this depressing villa. The mercenaries went through the door one after another. Jane Fankel hesitated for a while, but she still followed them. For some reason, there was a voice in her head that seemed to be stopping her from going through the door. Chapter 26:11. The moment Jane Fankel stepped through the door, she heard a deafening roar. Gunshots and explosions rang out one after another. Jane Fankel waved away the mist in front of her. She was so frightened that her body froze on the spot. Jane Fankel was frightened by the strange dragon with half of its body emerging from the mist. This was not home, but an unknown land shrouded in fog. Although only half of the dragon's body was exposed, it was already nearly 10 meters long and had powerful claws. Ayer and his mercenaries were currently engaged in a fierce battle with the strange dragon. However, be it guns or grenades, none of them could hurt the strange dragon. Every time the strange dragon waved its claws or spat out its dragon breath, it could kill a few mercenaries. Fankel, explain to me, what is this? What is this? Jane Fankel couldn't care less about A.L.'s questions. She stood there in a daze, unable to move her eyes. The scene in front of her, the creature in front of her, was completely beyond her understanding, beyond her worldview. What exactly is this? At that moment, a mercenary's entire body was bitten by the strange dragon. The mercenary let out a strange cry. At the same time, he pulled out his dagger and stabbed it into the strange dragon's neck and jaw. The strange dragon's skin was pierced, and in pain, it spat out a mouthful of acid. The mercenary was instantly dissolved. Air's expression changed. That monster seems to be able to be injured by cold weapons. Everyone had no choice but to drop the firearms in their hands. Instead, he pulled out his saber. Kill! At this moment, no one chose to retreat. It wasn't that they could ignore life and death. It was because they knew that they had no way out. If they retreated now, they would only die faster. They were the elite of the mercenaries. Elites did not necessarily represent their individual combat strength. It was because they knew when to make the right choice. Everyone threw themselves at the strange dragon without a care for their own safety. The strange dragon could melt a person with its acid breath. However, the other mercenaries had already pounced on the strange dragon. Everyone used all their strength to stab or scratch the neck of the strange dragon with their daggers. They were not warriors who faced death with equanimity, but at this moment they could be called warriors. The strange dragon's neck was riddled with holes. However, its vitality was still as tenacious as ever. Al suddenly pounced forward, his saber raised high above his head. A 1-meter-long wound appeared on the strange dragon's neck. Fresh blood splashed all over Air, and the strange dragon finally collapsed. At this moment, there were only a few people left in Ayer's group. Everyone was injured, and exhaustion was written all over their faces. They had never experienced a battle like this. It was a terrifying and strange battle. However, before everyone could heave a sigh of relief. However, countless strange dragon heads emerged from the fog. Everyone looked at the scene before them in despair. Some mercenaries even knelt on the ground and cried bitterly. At this moment, 3 figures gradually appeared in the fog. Jane Fankel's pupils shrank. 2 of the 3 people who appeared were her father, Old Max, and her brother, Caesar. The other person stood on the left side of Old Max, but he had a malicious smile on his face. The strange dragons did not attack the 3 of them. Fankel, I bet you didn't expect us to meet like this, Old Max said with a smile. Caesar licked his lips and looked at Jane Fankel vaguely. His gaze made Jane Fankel very uncomfortable. See, this is the power of the capital you were so proud of. Old Max pointed at the despairing mercenaries. Before our family's power, your power is so insignificant, so laughable. This is not our family's power. Countless thoughts popped up in Jane Fankel's mind. This was not what she understood. How could her family have such power? You can only blame your ignorance. We are supposed to be the kings of darkness. Now is the time to regain our family's glory. With these monsters, you will only bring your family to the grave with you, Jane Fankel said with a cold smile. She calmed down instead, even though her heart was already panicking. Father, since she has betrayed her family and bloodline, let her blood be a part of mine, Caesar said coldly. Old Max did not care about his son's request. He continued to look at Jane Fankel. Fankel, my daughter, I forgive you for your disobedience. Come back to my arms. Old Max opened his arms, as if welcoming Jane Fankel's arrival. Jane Fankel did not move. She felt that there was something about Old Max that made her feel uneasy. Also, Old Max's pupils were different from what she remembered. They were vertical pupils that she could not understand. Fankel, you have failed to live up to your father's expectations. Caesar looked at Jane Fankel with an even colder gaze. There was even a hint of joy in his eyes. Old Max rubbed his nose and said helplessly, Seems like Fankel has chosen a different path. Forget it. If you don't want to accept your family, then so be it. Caesar could not help but grin as he walked towards Jane Fankel step by step. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of Jane Fankel. Eyre was holding a submachine gun and fired at Caesar. Aha! Caesar was shot in all directions, but the bullets did not penetrate his skin. Jane Fankel looked at Caesar in disbelief. How was this possible? How could her brother ignore the attack of firearms? I will kill you all, Caesar roared. Half of his face was covered in scales. At that moment, a glass bottle was thrown into the mist and landed in front of Caesar. This. Caesar lowered his head and looked at the glass bottle. Damn it! Get away, you idiot! Old Max shouted anxiously. In the next instant, the glass bottle suddenly exploded, bursting with a dazzling white light. Jane Fankel and Eyre were also blinded by the dazzling white light. Suddenly, Jane Fankel and Eyre felt something grab the back of their necks and forcefully drag them into the mist. In the next instant, their vision turned black. It was as if they had traveled through a different world. They had returned to the other side of the door. A tall and slender woman was standing in front of them. The woman was holding a chain with both hands. The two ends of the chain were connected to hooks. It seemed like it was this pair of hooked claws that had dragged them out of the fog. Don't ask anything. If you don't want to die, we better leave this place first. Divine Emperor of the Nine Heavens. Chapter 26:12. After saying that, the woman turned around and walked away. Jane Fankel and Ariel hurried to catch up with the woman. They dared not ask any more questions. In short, everything that had happened just now, even the woman before them, had shown signs of abnormality. She ran a few kilometers away from the manor. Only then did the woman stop. Jane Fankel was so tired that she could not even stand up straight. She dared not stop during the whole process. Ariel was still full of energy. At the same time, he kept his guard up against the mysterious woman. They did not meet any obstacles along the way. It made him suspect the woman's identity even more. Is this enough? Jane Fankel asked worriedly. No. The woman turned around and looked at Jane Fankel. Suddenly, Jane Fankel saw the woman's pupils. She was so scared that she took a few steps back and fell on her, but Ariel's scalp went numb. He saw it too. He saw that the woman's pupils were the same as old Max's inhuman pupils. Ariel pulled out his knife and pointed it at the mysterious woman. Are you one of them? The mysterious woman curled her lips. One of them? Aren't you two the same? Us? We have nothing to do with those things. Even Jane Fankel could not convince herself of this. After all, two of her closest relatives had turned into those things. She was not sure whether she would turn into those things or not. Before this, she had no idea about it at all. Maybe she is, but I am not. I have nothing to do with her or her family. Ariel hated Jane Fankel very much. Even if he knew Jane Fankel might be a victim, still, he could not help but hate Jane Fankel. You received the dragon blood baptism and are still unscathed. You are telling me you are not a dragon descendant? What dragon blood baptism? What dragon descendant? I don't understand what you are talking about. If a normal person comes in contact with dragon blood, it will be like taking a bath in acid. If a drop of dragon blood is eaten by mistake, it will be like taking the deadliest poison. But you have not shown any abnormalities until now. It means that not only do you have dragon blood, but you have also awakened it. What are you talking about? I don't even know what you are talking about. Don't be in a hurry to deny it. Do you have greater endurance and stamina than ordinary people? I'm a mercenary. I've received the most professional training, so it's not strange that my endurance and stamina are better than ordinary people. When Eyre said that, he actually felt a little guilty, because he knew his own situation. His endurance, stamina, and even his body were more like data. Not only were they slightly stronger than ordinary people, but they were much, much stronger. However, Ire had always kept this secret in his heart and never revealed it to anyone. Some people's dragon bloodline awakening will have a very strong reaction, and the stronger the reaction, the purer the dragon bloodline is. Some dragon descendants' awakening is recessive, and the symptoms are not strong. Your physique is only slightly stronger than ordinary people, so you should belong to the recessive awakening of dragon descendants. Are you trying to tell me that I'm actually related to her? There are far more dragon descendants in this world than you can imagine, but that doesn't mean you are related, the mysterious woman said calmly. I want to know what happened here. What happened to my father and my big brother? Jane Fankel looked at the mysterious woman anxiously. It's complicated, and it's not something you can get involved in, so it's better if you don't know too much. But now that we are involved, do you think we can get out of this? Ire said calmly. He didn't dare to completely agree with the mysterious woman, but he felt that her words had some credibility. Do you remember that there was a third man other than you two, old Max and Caesar? He's like us. He's like us, but he's also different from us. What do you mean? He's a real dragon, the shadow dragon, Haber Timur Haber, and he's the cause of all this. The mysterious woman looked at Jane Fankel and smiled. And he's your grandfather's grandfather. How is that possible? He looks old enough to be my son. That's the truth. How do you know? The mysterious woman laughed. According to seniority, I should be your grandmother. You? Is it strange? Dragons have long lives, although their descendants can't live for thousands of years like the dragons. They still live longer than ordinary people. I'm 99 years old now. That's impossible. You look, Jane Fankel had wanted to say, you look like my daughter. However, she swallowed the words. Jane Fankel was still suspicious. She even suspected that this was some kind of parody show. The mysterious woman saw that Jane Fankel was still suspicious of her, so she continued, Actually, I'm your grandfather's sister, so it's fine if you call me Grandma. Of course. I'd prefer you to call me by my name, Varian Max. I'm not interested in your relationship. I just want to know what the fuck is going on, Ire said impatiently. I don't know what's going on either. My teammates and I are only responsible for hunting him down, Haber Timur Haber. Hunting him down? Didn't you say he's your grandfather? So what? Since you're hunting him down, where are your teammates? They're where they should be. When are you going to act? That's a real dragon. You can think of it as the scariest creature in the world. Do you think you can kill him as you please? What else? Are you going to get a nuclear weapon and blow him up? If you can, I don't mind, Varianki said. If you can, do you think I need you? Ire said, mockingly. For a moment, the three of them fell silent. Varianki sat down and rested. At the same time, she took out a few compressed biscuits and gave them to Ire and Jane Fankel. Ire, who had just finished a biscuit, suddenly stood up. No, I can't stay here. It's too dangerous. Varianki glanced at Ire. You think you can leave? What do you mean? Is there something waiting for us outside? Not on the outskirts, but around us. Chapter 26:13. Do you know why we're here? Varian asked Marx in return. God knows, Er said unhappily. It's because of this oak tree. Valerie patted the thick trunk and said, Her grandfather and I planted this tree together. We were only 8 years old back then. I'm not interested in your old stories. Er was getting more and more annoyed. Of course, our father told us that the oak tree was a sacred tree where the gods lived. It could resist the power of the devil. For a long time, I didn't understand what it meant, until the day I awakened my dragon bloodline and came into contact with a world that didn't belong to ordinary people. It was also that day that I saw the devil from hell. Varian was still talking to herself. Ire and Jen Fankel could tell who Varian was referring to when she mentioned the devil. After that, I left the family and joined an organization, the Dragon Slayers. Valerie took a deep breath and continued. In the past few decades, I've been hunting dragons all over the world. I've earned a title, Dragon Slayer. Varian Marks rolled up the sleeve of her arm. There was a dragon tattoo on it. My life's wish is to baptize my body with the blood of Haber Timur Haber. Valerie suddenly revealed a terrifying and ferocious expression. She patted the trunk of the oak tree heavily. The thick trunk shook slightly, and the mist shrouding the area dissipated a lot. Varian was slightly dazed. She changed her mind and stroked the tree trunk lightly. To her, this tree carried too many memories. Under the protection of the oak tree, the devil's power can't reach it. Outside the range of the branches and leaves are the mist and the strange dragons. This is the power of the demonic dragon, Haber Timur Haber. When will the mist dissipate? Dissipate? As long as he doesn't retract his domain, it will never dissipate. Won't he get tired? Maybe, but it's like keeping your eyes open. Whenever you feel tired, you might close your eyes and rest for a while. Besides, Haber Timur Haber's endurance is much stronger than yours. In other words, we will be trapped here forever. My companions are deploying, and they have already informed their helpers. Someone will be willing to help you. Haber Timur Haber has a lot of enemies. It can even be said that he has enemies all over the world. Not long ago, he did a few big things and killed a lot of people. However, he also fought with us. Many of our people died and he was injured. I think he might have come here to hide, but he neglected me. As one of his pursuers, I know him better than anyone else. Can the helper you found really defeat him? As long as there are enough people, there's hope, Varian said calmly. In fact, even she wasn't confident. After all, she had fought with Haber Timur Haber many times. He knew how cunning Haber Timur Haber was. No one was confident that they could defeat Haber Timur Haber. No one could guarantee that they would be able to kill him. However, this was an opportunity. After all, there weren't many chances for Haber Timur Haber to be injured. Being injured meant that he would be easier to deal with. Varian Marks was happy to choose this moment to deal with Haber Timur Haber. He did not hope to kill Haber Timur Haber. As long as she could injure him more severely, she would have achieved her goal. How long are we going to be trapped here? I still have an important contract to sign. The first thing you should think about now is not the contract, but how to stay alive. Varian glanced at Jane Fankel. In 3 days at most, this place will become a battlefield. Once the battle starts, you too might die here. What should we do? Can't you protect us? Protect you? Don't joke around. Our opponent is a demonic dragon, and it's the most cunning demonic dragon in history, Haber Timur Haber. No one will have the time to protect 2 ants at that time. You have no other choice but to protect yourselves. How do we protect ourselves? You must at least learn how to control and use the power contained in your blood. Although it won't give you sudden power, it will at least increase your magic resistance and immobility resistance. But what should we do? Jane Fankel's first reaction was to refuse. However, the next moment, she understood that this woman who called herself her grandmother would not be merciful to her just because of their blood relationship. Trust me, you won't want to fall into Haber Timur Haber's hands. Varian sneered at Jane Fankel. Why do you think he's hiding here? Why? For your blood, of course, Varian said. To him, you're the closest people to him. Your bloodlines are naturally compatible, so he needs your blood to recover from his injuries. Wait, who are you? My father and brother, they're also. Of course, they think they are favored by their ancestors. In fact, they are just fattened pigs that could be slaughtered by Haber Timur Haber at any time. Jane Fankel felt a little dizzy when she heard Varian's words. Is there no way to save them? Haha. They willingly accepted Haber Timur Haber's power, so they can't escape. Based on the current situation, we don't have the power to fight Haber Timur Haber. If the 2 of them are still alive before our reinforcements arrive, they might have a chance to survive. However, if Haber Timur Haber feels that his condition isn't good enough to fight against our reinforcements, He will definitely kill the two of them in order to quickly recover from his injuries. Very and Max looked at Jane Fankel. Jane Fankel was eager to give it a try. Don't even think about saving them. No matter how much you say, they won't believe you. They might even expose their whereabouts. You are a merchant, so you should know that it's not worth it. Chapter 26:14. Right now, Chen Zhao was inside the river diagram. Chen Zhao soaked in the divine power potion. Although he couldn't control every cell at will, he was still able to do it. But Chen Zhao could still clearly feel the activity or weakness of every cell. However, the divine power elixir did not work on the cellular level. Chen Zhao's body had evolved many times with the golden key. It could be said to have reached an unbelievably perfect state. Of course, it didn't mean that Chen Zhao's body had evolved to the extreme. It was just that it had reached the limit of what Chen Zhao could bear with his current level. However, as the divine power potion seeped in, Chen Zhao's cells were giving off pleasant feedback. The divine power potion was very complicated, so complicated that Chen Zhao couldn't understand it. This was the domain of alchemists. The first thing Chen Zhao felt was the effect of the potion. Chen Zhao was most familiar with this feeling. After all, the first potion Chen Zhao came into contact with was the strength potion. It was something to lay a foundation for Chen Zhao. It could be said that all of Chen Zhao's power gains in the past were built on the premise of the strength potion. But now he realized that something in his body had been triggered. Chen Zhao couldn't completely understand what it was either. That was because it was a feeling that was more detailed than that of cells. Right now, Chen Zhao was like a towering skyscraper. This gave Chen Zhao the feeling that someone was tearing down the foundation of a skyscraper and building and strengthening it at the same time. Yes, this was the feeling. There was pain, but there was also comfort. Therefore, it was difficult to tell whether it was pain or comfort or both. The reconstruction process was not fast. Chen Zhao soaked in the divine power potion for 7 days and 7 nights. Chen Zhao realized that his body seemed to have changed. It wasn't a complete transformation. It was more like he was wearing a new set of clothes. From the inside to the outside, his senses had changed. Even his spirit, energy, and spirit had changed. Chen Zhao tested the sensations in his body. Under extreme conditions, the increase in strength was not much. However, it was still an obvious improvement. Chen Zhao returned to soak in the divine power potion. Chen Zhao had a new feeling. Something that had been hidden in his body for a long time exploded, like a barrel of gunpowder that had been ignited. Agent X. Chen Zhao had once broken into a certain lab. Then he unscrupulously poured Agent X into his mouth. Chen Zhao didn't feel much at the time. Even Chen Zhao had almost forgotten about it. That was because Agent X did not bring about too many changes to him. Moreover, Chen Zhao had cultivated many times and increased his realm. They also did not discover the existence of Drug X. He had always thought that it was because he couldn't absorb Agent X. Therefore, Chen Zhao had already metabolized Agent X. But at this moment, Chen Zhao realized something. It's not gone, it's always been there. However, it had turned into molecules and kept flowing in his body. But the divine power potion activated it. Not only had the X drug been activated, but the divine power drug had also made up for its deficiencies. This chemical process makes it even more perfect. It made Chen Zhao's foundation even more perfect. Chen Zhao's body was baptized by Agent X again and again. The extreme chemical reaction between science and magic was happening in his body. Biological functions and thinking were actually chemical reactions. The chemical reaction of amino acids, sugar, and dopamine caused the cerebral cortex to produce a phenomenon of microcurrent discharge. The so-called emotions were actually the electrical discharge of the brain. Chen Zhao realized that his brain had become very active. That was a sign that spiritual energy was spreading outward. Chen Zhao's spiritual energy was actually not very strong. What was strong was Chen Zhao's soul. After all, it was because of the soul key. Qin Zhao had devoured many soul fragments. These fragments fed back to his soul, making it tough and indestructible. But Qin Zhao's spiritual energy was weak. After all, Qin Zhao walked the path of strengthening. He had almost never actively cultivated his spiritual energy. He had always been strengthening passively. When his soul became stronger, his spiritual energy would naturally become stronger. But now, Qin Zhao realized that his spiritual energy was growing exponentially. Agent X didn't just seem to be acting on his body. It was also happening in his brain. However, Qin Zhao's control over his spiritual energy was extremely weak. Qin Zhao's spiritual energy was like a mist. It floated out and became thinner and thinner until he could not feel anything at all. Qin Zhao could not condense his spiritual energy together like those spiritual magic masters and form telekinesis. Qin Zhao could only use it for the most basic function, perception. But when his spiritual energy spread out, it was still within Qin Zhao's domain. Within Qin Zhao's 1,500-meter domain, his spiritual energy dissipated before it could spread out. On the other hand, the things that spiritual power could perceive were clearer and more comprehensive than the things that one's domain could perceive. The two overlapped in terms of perception. This also caused Qin Zhao's spiritual energy growth to be of little value. The spiritual energy's function overlapped with the domain, but it could not reach the domain's range, clarity, and sensitivity. So, spiritual energy was almost useless to Qin Zhao. Of course, to say that it was completely useless was not entirely true. If someone tried to use soul attack on Qin Zhao, they would first have to destroy the spiritual energy that Qin Zhao spread out. The same kind of attack would be weakened before it could even touch Qin Zhao. When Qin Zhao had fought Yeta Rainster last time, he had suffered from a soul attack. That thing was really hard to bear, but there weren't many enemies who could use soul attacks. There were even fewer soul attacks that could threaten him. Of course, Qin Zhao did not mind having more. It was never bad to have more skills. Qin Zhao cared more about the growth of his body and strength. Qin Zhao could not be sure how strong he was now. However, Qin Zhao still had a simple test. That was to release a neutron star with all his strength. He wanted to see how powerful the neutron star was. With the improvement of his basic body and the activation of Agent X, Qin Zhao's body improved in all aspects. Qin Zhao could not use accurate numbers for comparison. However, the power of the neutron star he released could flatten a 100-meter hill. This destructive power was quite impressive. Moreover, the 100-meter range was almost an absolute destructive range. Even Qin Zhao could be heavily injured in this range. Compared to before, the absolute destructive power of a 50-meter range was 2 times greater. The destructive radius was 2 times greater. Compared to a flat surface, it was 4 times greater. Moreover, the destructive power within the radius was 5 times greater. Chapter 26:15. During the third soak, Qin Zhao felt that he had a deeper understanding of his divinized giant form. All the inadequacies in the past were suddenly filled and perfected. The divinized giant form was more advanced than the basic foundation stones and the activation of the X drug. However, the improvement wasn't as great as the two because an increase in the foundation meant an increase in the base. The improvement of the divinized giant form was obvious, but not as great as expected. What really improved was Qin Zhao's control over his power. Then Qin Zhao soaked in the divine power potion again. However, he felt that the potion's effects had clearly weakened. Qin Zhao thought to himself, "This thing is indeed good. I'll get Fate Nitak to make more next time." Of course, the other materials were easy to take care of. It was just the 100 bloodlines of the King of Power's subordinates. Qin Zhao had to collect them for a year. After all, Qin Zhao couldn't wander around hell every day. He also couldn't meet the subordinates of the King of Power every day. After the fourth soak, Chen Zhao had completely absorbed the potion's effects. The originally colorful liquid had now turned into a pure, transparent color. Chen Zhao could feel that the divine power potion was still effective on him. It was just that the amount wasn't enough. Chen Zhao started cultivating in the small world again. Currently in its complete state, Chen Zhao could create 100,000 high-density white dwarfs weighing tens of thousands of tons at the same time. In terms of pure destructive power, Chen Zhao's full-powered attack could destroy an entire city instantly. Through the physical movement of the 100,000 black balls, he could easily destroy most enemies. However, Chen Zhao felt that this wasn't the limit of the small world. The growth of the small world hadn't reached its limit either. In Chen Zhao's previous trip to Hell, the small world had absorbed large amounts of power from the demon lords. However, the absorption method was very crude. The amount of power he could use was very little. There was even more power stored in the small world. Chen Zhao needed to refine this power and make it his true power. As he continued to refine it, the power of the demon lords made the heavenly patterns in the small world flourish. Suddenly, Chen Zhao realized that there was a green fruit in the small world. He didn't know when it had formed. The green fruit was very abrupt and solid. A solid object had actually appeared in his small world. The fruit was very bright and green, as tender as a crisp apple. Chen Zhao tilted his head and looked at the green fruit. With a thought, the fruit fell from the heavenly pattern. Chen Zhao waved his hand and the fruit landed in his hand. There was nothing special about it. Chen Zhao wasn't afraid of the poison. He took a bite. In an instant, an extremely rich life force spread in his mouth along with the juicy flesh of the fruit. Ah! Chen Zhao moaned in pleasure. None of the ingredients in the world could compare to this fruit. It was a completely unfamiliar texture, but it was more delicious than any other ingredient. In fact, the taste was not something that ordinary people could eat. This was because ordinary people simply could not withstand such a strong life force. As the saying goes, it's too weak to be nourished. Chen Zhao ate the fruit in a few bites and felt his vitality increase again. Apart from increasing his vitality, the fruit did not seem to have other effects. However, if he diluted the life force in the flesh of the fruit, he didn't know if it could be given to his family. Chen Zhao continued cultivating in the small world. At the same time, he took out a few frozen demon lord corpses. Beelzebub Sophie had helped him seal it to stop the power from flowing out of the demon lord's corpses. While absorbing the power from the corpses, Chen Zhao realized that a second green fruit had formed in the small world. Chen Zhao thought for a moment and put the fruit away. He continued to focus on refining the demon lord's power. Using their power as nutrients, he continuously nourished the small world. Chen Zhao could already feel that the power of the small world had surpassed his own. Just then, Chen Zhao realized that the small world was feeding back to him. The two couldn't be improved separately because Chen Zhao himself was the one maintaining the small world. First, the control of the small world had increased from 100,000 white dwarfs to 500,000. It was 5 times more than before. At the same time, Chen Zhao could condense 10 compact neutron stars through the small world without using his body. Each one weighed 100 million tons. The speed of condensation also increased greatly. The process that would have taken more than 10 minutes could be completed in a few minutes now. The 10 compact neutron stars circled around him. Chen Zhao could control their speed at will. This meant that most attacks would not be able to get close to him. Chen Zhao cultivated in the river map for almost half a year. However, only a few hours had passed outside. Every time he came out of the river map, he would feel like he was back in the world. Just then, Chen Zhao realized that there were a few missed calls from Zhangting in China. Hey Zhangting, what's up? Boss, we finished the education system you asked us to write last time. We also invited a few university professors and experts to discuss it. I'll send the document to you now. Sure, send it over. Oh, the company's on holiday, right? Everyone's on holiday. Only a few people are doing year-end summaries. They'll be released in a day or two. A proper company wouldn't let the boss go on holiday just because he wanted to. Everyone would just drop their work and go home to enjoy themselves. A normal holiday would require a few people to do the final summary. At the same time, they would also notify their partner companies about the progress. Sure, check your account. I'll transfer some money to you. Go to the bank and exchange it. Then, send a big red packet to those who delayed their holidays. Boss, you're not feeding your employees, you're feeding your enemies. You're giving them such high benefits now. If you can't give them such great benefits in the future, they'll only be disloyal. I'll only be richer in the future, Qin Zhao said, unconcerned. Sigh. Zhang Ting had a headache now. She even hated Chen Zhao a little. It was impossible for him to resign, not in this lifetime. She really couldn't find a boss more generous and easy to serve than Qin Zhao. This was much more comfortable than when she was her own boss. Oh, boss, do you know the joke of a 40-meter knife? I'm overseas, but it doesn't mean I don't know the jokes online. Say, if X can create a 40-meter knife, what's the effect? Chapter 26:16. When the density of matter reaches or approaches that of a neutron star, the form of matter is meaningless, Qin Zhao said. There's no fundamental difference between a ball and a knife. At the same weight, a ball the size of a ping-pong ball is more lethal than a 40-meter knife. Boss, I'm talking in camera language, not real physics. The effect of a 40-meter knife is much better than a ping-pong ball. No, the setting of X needs to be considered from the perspective of physics. Fine. Zhang Ting didn't understand why Qin Zhao had to focus on physics. To her, the characteristic of X itself wasn't scientific. But Qin Zhao had to make an unscientific character conform to the characteristics of physics. Wasn't that putting the cart before the horse? But he was the boss. Also, book a suite in a Magic City hotel on the 15th day of the year. It'll be the venue for our company's gathering. I'll pay for it. Zhang Ting wasn't surprised by Qin Zhao's request at all. Qin Zhao had always been so generous. If he didn't make this request, Zhang Ting would find it strange. Also, book 2 plane tickets or train tickets to Dragon Tiger Mountain in Jiangxi. Boss, you're going to burn incense. No, I'm old friends with the Celestial Masters sect leader. We're having a gathering. Fine, that's all you rich people want now. Zhang Ting clearly misunderstood Qin Zhao. After hanging up the phone, Zhang Ting told the good news that the boss was going to give them a bonus. Seeing that it was still early, Qin Zhao flew into the sky again. Qin Zhao was curious. What was his limit? In hell, he'd flown 300,000 meters in the sky. But that was in hell. Hell was countless times bigger than the human world. The thickness of the atmosphere was also much thicker. Gravity could no longer restrict Qin Zhao. Now, Qin Zhao could resist the strong radiation of the universe. He could even absorb it and turn it into his own magic. This was no longer a limiting factor for Qin Zhao. What restricted him was the thinness of the air. Even Qin Zhao needed to breathe now. Of course, it wasn't difficult for Qin Zhao to temporarily change to internal breathing. Even ordinary people might be able to do it. For example, some people could dive for 20 to 30 minutes without any equipment. This was a typical internal breathing technique. Qin Zhao could absorb the oxygen in the water, but in the absolute vacuum of the universe, he couldn't do it. Qin Zhao could already fly up to 80,000 meters in the air. Generally, the altitude of a commercial plane was only 8 to 12,000 meters. 20,000 meters above them would be the ozone layer. Qin Zhao's current limit was the middle layer. Above them was the dissipation layer, where there was almost no air. Even Qin Zhao's small world couldn't gather enough air. The air density here was a billionth of that at sea level. In other words, 100 billion cubic meters of air here was equivalent to 1 cubic meter of air at sea level. Here, Chen Zhao couldn't use neutron star, white dwarf, and other skills. This was because Chen Zhao's neutron stars and white dwarfs were mainly made by condensing air. However, Chen Zhao could not even absorb air here, let alone create high-density neutron stars and white dwarfs. But in this environment that was close to a vacuum, there was no air resistance. Chen Zhao's speed also increased greatly. This was the harshest environment on Earth. Even the two poles were far from this place. Every time he reached an extreme environment and stayed there for a long time, Chen Zhao's body would adapt. His body's functions would start to coordinate, allowing him to adapt to the environment. Chen Zhao doubted if he could really adapt to a vacuum environment one day. Of course, it could also be an evolution of his body's functions. It could also be that his cultivation had reached the point where he could fly. Chen Zhao looked like he could fly now, but he was still far from reaching the legendary 9 heavens, plucking the moon and the 9 hells. Most of Chen Zhao's powers were unnatural, but many of them were related to science. Chen Zhao moved. In a few seconds, he returned to Mirror Lake. He followed the tunnel at the bottom of Mirror Lake and entered thousands of meters underground. After a few months, a large number of underground creatures had appeared here again. Last time, Chen Zhao had already killed a batch. Moreover, the flesh of these creatures was all used as ingredients for Marina's restaurant. The growth rate of these underground creatures was very fast, and some of them were large enough to threaten the safety of humans. Most of them should have gathered here from the tunnel that extended in all directions. The reason was that there was water here, so the creatures would gather here. If there was water, there would be food. Even humans had this instinct, let alone animals. The creatures that gathered here from other places were clearly different from the aquatic creatures here. The creatures from other places were clearly much larger. On the other hand, the aquatic creatures here were obviously much smaller. Back then, Chen Zhao had killed many of the creatures in this lake, but he'd still left some small ones. But in a few months, they'd grown considerably. Chen Zhao had considered using this place as a breeding farm. So this time he was especially merciful. Even if some creatures attacked him first, he would choose to dodge most of the time instead of killing them with a slap. After all, every single creature here was extremely valuable as a source of food. Of course, Chen Zhao wouldn't use their meat as ingredients for his restaurant without trying them first. Chen Zhao had tried every creature here first. He had also tested them to ensure that their meat was safe. Chen Zhao made some records, such as the forms and habits of every creature here. Not every creature here was aggressive. Some of them ate the minerals that had softened in the lake water. These creatures were Chen Zhao's favorite because they weren't aggressive and had a simple source of food. Chen Zhao wondered if he should open up a larger space underground for a breeding farm. After circling around, he brought a few creatures back to the surface. However, most of them died as soon as they returned. Only a mollusk that looked like a snail was still alive. Chapter 26:17. Chen Zhao looked at the mollusks that he'd named stone snails. They were omnivores. Chen Zhao had observed them before. An adult stone snail could weigh up to 700 kilograms, but half of its weight was in its stone shell. The stone shell of a stone snail was very hard. Apart from its own shell, it would also use mud and sharp rocks to stick on its shell. As long as other predators attacked it, it would immediately retreat into its shell. Its main food was water plants and some minerals. Chen Zhao really liked stone snail meat. Marina's restaurant's sales were also very good. A plate of 150 grams of stone snail meat cost $150 at Marina's restaurant. At least 200 servings of stone snail meat were sold every day. After deducting the costs, Chen Zhao's profit from the stone snail meat alone reached $25,000 a day. Therefore, if it was just Marina restaurant alone, the supply of stone snails would exceed the demand. Marina's restaurant would at most use 30 kilograms a day. It wasn't even 1/10 of an adult stone snail. Moreover, stone snails weren't cheap. Chen Zhao was thinking about raising stone snails on a large scale. At least, that was if he could raise them. Stone snails could adapt to the environment on the ground. Now, it depended on its growth cycle and food intake. In the morning, after Feilai went to work, Chen Zhao called Azak. Azak, come to my house. You don't know? Okay, I'll give you the address. A while later, Azak arrived at Chen Zhao's house. Like most people, he was shocked when he saw Chen Zhao's Mirror Lake Manor. Even Itzhak was shocked. Chen Zhao's wealth was greater than he'd imagined. Boss. Azak entered the manor and saw Chen Zhao lying on a chair in the yard. Okay, come with me. Chen Zhao glanced at Azak and walked into the woods. Azak didn't know what Chen Zhao was going to do, but he still followed obediently. Just then, a giant snail appeared in front of Isaac. Boss, what's this? Azak was a bit scared. This snail was really too big. Its shell was already around 2 meters long. Don't worry, it's not aggressive. I called you here because I want you to study some of its data. Raise it, breed it, and its needs for food. Right now, I only know that it mainly eats aquatic plants. Okay, boss, what's the use of this thing? Its meat provides my restaurant with nearly $10 million in profit every year. What do you think it's good for? Isaac almost slapped himself. He actually questioned the task his boss had given him. Also, how's the formation of your Marine Biology Research Institute team? Currently, the initial formation has been completed, but there are no projects worth researching yet. Have you heard of the mysterious island? I know. As a marine biology professional, how could Isaac not know about the mysterious island? That would cause a sensation in the biological world, especially in marine biology. Several famous international teams tried to contact the owner of the mysterious island and the person in charge. They hoped to conduct research on the mystical island, but they were all rejected. Your team is going to Mysterious Island to study the giant sea creatures there, Chen Zhao said. Boss, you've already contacted the person in charge of the mystical island. The mystical island is mine. Why? Isaac stared at Chen Zhao in shock. The mystical island belonged to his boss? He'd heard that the mystical island's commercial value was over $100 billion. The creatures on the mystical island had already shocked the scientific world. There were even huge repercussions in society. There were all kinds of news about the mystical island almost every day. Even Hollywood was planning to get in on the action. Some film companies even planned to make movies about the mystical island. The outside world had also been guessing who the mysterious owner of the mystical island was. He didn't expect Chen Zhao to be the owner of the mystical island. He recalled that before the mystical island had appeared, Chen Zhao had already recruited him and formed a marine biology research team. This meant that Chen Zhao already knew of the mystical island's existence. He could even calculate the mystical island's rise. This made Isaac respect Chen Zhao even more. What kind of team could calculate the rise and fall of an island? Unless it was the world's top mathematical team and had the help of a supercomputer. Otherwise, Oken wouldn't be able to calculate when an island would rise from the sea. Boss, I'll do my best to complete the mission you gave me. I won't disappoint you. That's for the best. Chen Zhao nodded. Chen Zhao didn't care if Isaac was ambitious or not. Everyone had the right to aspire to a better life. Just then, Chen Zhao received a call. It was from Zola. Chen, I'm planning to release a new spring collection. Do you need it? Now. If you're free, then I'll go over now. Isaac glanced at Chen Zhao. After Chen Zhao hung up, he said, Boss, if you're busy, I'll leave first. Okay. Oh, I'll have someone send the snail over. After sending Isaac off, Chen Zhao went to the Baroness headquarters. It was just like his first time here. It was still so busy. Designers, assistants, and models were all moving around the venue. A tall model walked hurriedly and bumped into Chen Zhao. Are you blind? Sorry. Chen Zhao smiled and took 2 steps back. Shut up, bitch. Nat jogged over. When he looked at Chen Zhao, he had a big smile on his face. Chin, you're here. Come with me. Nat pulled Chen Zhao's wrist and walked to his dressing room. Smiling, Chen Zhao broke free from Nat's hand without batting an eyelid. Nat had always said that he was straight. However, Chen Zhao found it hard to believe someone who was used to pointing at him. As if he didn't feel it, Nat pulled Chen Zhao into the dressing room. All of you get out, Nat said. Ava, you stay. Ava was wearing glasses, but it wasn't hard to tell that she was a beauty. To be honest, the Baroness employees, whether it was normal runners, assistants, or designers, were almost all handsome men and beautiful women, not to mention the models here. Even if it was Sissy Night, he was still a handsome guy. Nat's clothes were more feminine. He was indeed a handsome guy, and he was the kind of handsome guy who had quite an imposing aura. He wasn't any worse than Hollywood stars. 9 Heaven's God King. Chapter 26:18. Chin, take off your shirt and pants. Nat had taken advantage of Chen Zhao many times. Every season, Chen Zhao would come over to get his body measured. Then Nat would drag him in. Actually, it was fine as long as he was familiar with it. Chen Zhao hoped that Triss would help him measure his body. However, Triss would measure Feilai every time. Chen Zhao did not want Nat to touch her. When Chen Zhao took off his clothes, Nat and Ava's eyes widened. Chen, your body is perfect, Nat said, swallowing. Ava wiped away the saliva at the corner of her mouth and gently touched Chen Zhao's chest. Chen Zhao's skin was slightly yellow. His 2 chest muscles were like exquisite brass, shining with a metallic luster. The intoxicating feeling made Ava a bit dazed. Smiling, Chen Zhao pushed Ava's hand away. Only then did Ava reluctantly move her hand away. Ava glanced at Nat. Nat had walked behind the curtain to take out his tools. How much do you charge? Ava asked in a low voice. Chen Zhao was stunned. Did she think of him as a model? He heard that many models had special part-time jobs. Did he look like a part-time model? How much do you think I'm worth? Ava gritted her teeth and looked Chen Zhao up and down. $2,000. Chen Zhao chuckled. He did not expect Ava to pay $2,000. After all, an assistant's salary was not high, even if an assistant designer's salary was higher than that of assistants in other industries. But $2,000 was not a small amount for most people. She was actually willing to spend $2,000 on him. Or was he worth $2,000? Just then, Nat walked out. Ava immediately shut her mouth. Nat glared at Ava, and she immediately shrunk her head. It seemed that Nat was quite intimidating in front of Ava. While Nat was about to measure, Ava gave Chen Zhao another name card. She gestured to Chen Zhao with her hand, call me. After Nat finished his preparations, he finally came to measure Chen Zhao's body. Chin, your body is really perfect. It's like a piece of art, full of power, but it doesn't destroy the beauty. With that, Nat patted Chen Zhao's butt. Turn around. Nat was always like this. He would habitually take advantage of Chen Zhao and then change the topic as if nothing had happened. Rubbing his forehead, Chen Zhao said, Nat, if you want, I can train you for free. If Knight really agreed, Chen Zhao wouldn't mind taking revenge on him. Unfortunately, Nat did not fulfill his wish. Forget it, I'm not your style, Knight said. I prefer this kind of neutral style. You call this neutral? Apart from your sexual characteristics, which part of you look like a man? Are you an idiot? All you can do is stand there. Don't you know how to lend a hand? Press the other end of the ruler down. Nate suddenly changed his attitude and shouted at Ava. Not only was Ava shocked, but Chen Zhao was also shocked. There was no doubt that Nat was an outstanding designer. However, his personality was truly unflattering. Just then, Zola pushed the door open and entered. Hi, Chin. Zola pulled a chair over and looked at Knight and Ava. Chen Zhao was the only one left, controlled by Knight. Zola. Chen Zhao nodded and continued to cooperate with Nat's torture. Your body is getting better. As long as you keep exercising, anyone can do it. I interact with models every day. I've seen at least 1,000 models' bodies, but I've never seen a man's body like yours. It's so thrilling. Zola shook her head. You look like a lion. You don't have exaggerated lines, but there's a mysterious danger. See, Chin, even Zola says that. Nat seemed to have found someone who understood him, although Knight said that he did not slack off at all in his work. His work was extremely meticulous. For example, the circumference of Chen Zhao's wrist, upper and lower wrist, neck circumference, neck length. Every measurement had to be carefully measured. Ava, grab that one, Nat scolded again. Even with Zola present, Nat's attitude towards Ava did not change at all. Just then, Zola stood up and pulled the other end of the ruler. Seeing that her boss had started, Ava could only retreat to the side and watch. Does it feel tight? Nat asked. A little looser. How about this? You can loosen it a little more, Qin Zhao said. Yeah, that's more like it. Chen, are you interested in buying shares in the Baroness? Are you sure? Chen Zhao looked at Zola in surprise. In the bank's evaluation, the Baroness was also a high-quality property. It provided Zola with generous returns every year. It could be said that as long as she asked the bank to use the Baroness shares as collateral, the bank could give a low-interest loan that was 5 times the Baroness valuation. Zola had 100% control over the shares. Even when her father, Rasfa, wanted to buy it, she rejected him. Ava found it strange. Finding a model to buy shares in the Baroness? I have no choice, Zola said helplessly. I'm really short on money recently. The bank didn't lend you money? The interest is still too high, Zola said. At least for me, it's too much pressure. Didn't I promise that as long as you need it, I can lend you money at the lowest interest? Zola shook her head. I need more money. How much? $1.5 billion. You don't need to pay that much, right? My father wants me to buy more shares, Zola said. He needs some cash flow. To put it bluntly, Zola and Rasfa were father and daughter. Zola was destined to inherit Rasfa's wealth in the future. The more Rasfa had, the more inheritance tax he would have to pay in the future. Thus, Rasfa and Zola wanted to reduce their wealth through some normal operations. Are you interested in the Baroness? Zola continued the previous topic. Yes, Qin Zhao said directly. How many shares are you planning to sell to me? Not more than 20%. Then how much are you planning to sell it for? Qin Zhao asked. At this moment, Knight's movements were a little sluggish. The Baroness' current market value is $5 billion. I want a 50% premium. According to your request, exactly $5 billion. Chen Zhao chuckled. I agree to the deal in general, but you can't decide the price alone. You should talk to my lawyer first. Chapter 2619. Ava felt that she'd just done something really stupid. She'd just used $2,000 to insult a billionaire. More accurately, she'd insulted herself. Hopefully he wouldn't mind. Qin Zhao didn't plan on doing that. Or rather, he'd already forgotten about it. Okay, Qin, Nat said. Your clothes for this season will take about 5 days. Thanks. Chen Zhao nodded and looked at Zola. Let's eat together. I'm afraid I won't be able to find time soon. The spring fashion show is about to start. I feel like you're busier than me. Zola rolled her eyes. Of course I'm busier than you. You're richer than me, but you give all the work to others while I have to do it myself. You can also choose to give it to others. We'll see, Zola said casually. Actually, Chen Zhao could understand a strong woman like Zola. It was simply unimaginable to throw his job to someone else. Moreover, not everyone was as lazy as Qin Zhao. As the saying went, power was the deadliest poison. No one could give it up. Chen Zhao's car drove out of the Baroness headquarters. Just then, a luxury car blocked Qin Zhao's path. Hi, Mr. Chen. Nice to meet you. I'm Modela. Hi, sorry, I'm in a hurry. Can you excuse me? Chen Zhao clearly didn't plan on getting to know this man who'd suddenly appeared. In fact, Chen Zhao didn't like this behavior. If he really wanted to get to know Chen Zhao, he had to be more polite. He shouldn't block Chen Zhao's way like this. Madala didn't mind Chen Zhao's attitude. Mr. Chen, I might have forgotten to introduce myself. I'm the CEO of Viller Investment Management Company. I have a large amount of cash. I can give you great rewards. You can contact my assistant or my lawyer. I'll consider your offer. Mr. Chen, since we've met, why don't we talk now or find a place? Sorry, I'm in a hurry. Madala clearly didn't realize that his behavior had already caused Chen Zhao's displeasure. Then let's push away the trivial matters. I don't think there's anything more important than our cooperation. Chen Zhao no longer planned on maintaining his disguise with Madala. Chen Zhao looked at Madala with a dark expression. If you want to work with me, you have to learn manners first. Hearing this, Matilla's face darkened as well. Yellow monkey, I dare you to say it again. White-skinned pig, when your mother gave birth to you, did she forget to teach you manners? When it came to arguing, Chen Zhao had never been afraid of anyone. You will pay for your words, monkey, Madala said fiercely. Chen Zhao pointed his middle finger at Madala. Chen Zhao wasn't someone who could be easily fooled. Matilla's eyes flashed with killing intent. Chen Zhao didn't care. Looks can't kill. On the way back, Chen Zhao called Alex. Alex, do you know Viller Investment Management? I know, what's wrong? Today, there was a man who claimed to be the chairman of Viller Investment Management Company. I think he was called Madala. You didn't promise him anything, did you? No, that Madala really pissed me off. What do you know? I'm not very familiar with Viller Investment Management Company, but it's very famous in the industry. Is it very influential? No, it's just that they have a lot of dirty tricks up their sleeves. Most of the people or companies that work with them have been scammed by them without exception. What's their main trick? The most common method is to gain the trust of the partner and hand the company over to them to manage. Then they will sell the company to a third party as an agent. They are very good at this kind of thing from a legal perspective. Once the transaction is completed, it will be impossible for the victim to get the company back even if he wants to. Alex continued to say, this is what they do on the surface, but there are a lot of things that they don't do on the surface. It is said that some people were forced to hand over their companies to them. As for how they forced them, you can use your imagination. Although I know that you are very skilled in certain aspects, they are professionals. Kidnapping? Blackmail? That's about it. Anyway, it's just colluding with the local gangs and doing some shady business. You have to be careful. Okay, got it. As soon as Chen Zhao hung up, another call came in. The caller was none other than Morgary. Hey, Morgary, how come you have time to call me? Chen, someone wants to deal with you. I just got a job. Someone wants me to kidnap your family. Is that person called Madala? You already know. I just know this person. We just had a feud not too long ago. Do you need me to do anything? Chen Zhao and Morgary were the kind of people who wouldn't contact each other for tens of thousands of years. Even during festivals, they would only send each other a congratulatory message. But they both knew that they were each other's friends. They would only appear when the other person needed them. No need, Chen Zhao said calmly. After a moment of silence, Chen Zhao said, by the way, do you have anyone who's really short of money and willing to do anything for it? Huh, I have a lot of people like that. I want people who have something to care about, not people who have nothing to care about and are all alone. What do you want to do? Huh, make something happen, of course. Chen Zhao's laughter had a hint of coldness. Then you better be more detailed. After all, they're not ordinary people. If there's just a little bit of evidence, they can get away. I know. Pick someone and tell him to go somewhere. I'll meet him there. Chen Zhao didn't plan on letting Morgary give him his contact number. Got it. What else do you need me to do? Chen Zhao made another call. This time it was to inform Alex. He told her that he had a plan. After a moment of silence, Alex agreed. Chun Zhao went to the kindergarten again. Chin, why are you here? School's not over yet. Clive looked at Chun Zhao's sudden visit in confusion. There's something I need to talk to you about. Huh? Someone might attack my children in the next few days, Chin Zhao said. If so, are you and Anpa confident in protecting them? If not, let them go on holiday for now. We'll talk about it after this is over. Divine King of the Nine Heavens. Chapter 2620. Berkeley was one of the poorest neighborhoods in Los Angeles. How poor was it? Up to 40% of the neighborhood was homeless. As far as the eye could see, there were only homeless people. Bowl and his family lived in this neighborhood. Dirty and messy were no words to describe how poor the neighborhood was. Even the cashiers at the Golden Arches had bulletproof glass. Any restaurant was only open from 10 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. After 4 in the afternoon, one would definitely be robbed. Bowl returned home. His wife's voice came immediately. Vitan, where did you go last night? His wife's tone carried a hint of questioning. Out drinking with friends, Bowl replied tiredly. You know we need money now, right? You know Claire needs medical bills, right? You know we haven't paid our rent, utilities, and phone bills this month, right? You're still in the mood to drink? His wife's tone grew angrier. Why can't you find a proper job? You think I don't want to. But who would want a guy who's been in prison? Bowl let out a deafening roar of his own. Then why are you in prison? The couple had already started their daily quarrel. At this moment, a timid voice interrupted the couple. A little girl, holding a dirty doll in her arms, stood by the bedroom door. Cough. Daddy, Mommy, did you fight again? The couple immediately stopped fighting. No, Mommy and Daddy are just acting. Then can you stop acting? Claire doesn't like it. Bowl glared at his wife and then looked at his daughter as gently as possible. Of course, no problem. Claire's complexion was very bad. She was born with no immune system. She was also known as a glass person. Bowl and his wife couldn't afford to create a completely isolated environment for her, so she had to take antibiotics constantly. But as she took more and more, the effect of the antibiotics was greatly reduced. Both her body and the bacteria in her began to develop resistance. This led to frequent infections in the past 2 years. The slightest symptom was a high fever. More serious was a physiological imbalance. Her bodily functions became seriously abnormal, and she even temporarily lost her function. The only way to completely solve Claire's disease was to change her system. That was to transplant someone else's bone marrow to create an immune system in her own body. Beauregard's marrow was a match for Claire's. However, a bone marrow transplant would cost $200,000. That was something Bowl could never afford. Claire was 5 years old, and when she was a year old, Beauregard had been in prison. It was because she was desperate to raise money for Claire's surgery. The result was predictable. Not only did he not get the money, but he also went to jail. Daddy, I want you to sleep with me. All right. Bowl had a ferocious look on his face, but when it came to his daughter, he didn't seem to mind at all. It was as if he had changed his face, never showing even a trace of viciousness. Lying on the bed with Claire in his arms, Claire whispered, Daddy, I feel a little uncomfortable. Boreye's heart skipped a beat as he had a bad feeling. Are you feeling unwell? I feel like I can't breathe. Bowl sat up abruptly. When did it start? It started last night. Claire scratched her neck. There were many slight scratches on her neck. Every time I do this a few times, it seems to be better. Claire opened her mouth wide and started inhaling and exhaling. But this time, Claire didn't seem to be getting better. Bowl quickly informed his wife and dialed the emergency number. The couple had no time to bicker. They followed the ambulance to the hospital. Claire was sent to the emergency room, and the couple anxiously waited for the result outside. Not long after, a doctor walked out of the emergency room, took off his mask, and looked at the couple in front of him. Are you the patient's parents? Yes. How is Claire? Do you know the patient's exact condition? The couple became more and more uneasy. Bull asked, What's wrong with Claire? The bacterial infection caused a chain reaction that caused her respiratory tract to become inflamed. But she only took antibiotics 3 days ago. According to our blood test, the antibiotics are completely ineffective. That means she'll be infected as soon as she leaves the isolation room, the doctor said. I suggest you arrange an operation for her immediately. Even if she's in the isolation room, it doesn't mean she's completely safe. Bull slumped into a chair, his eyes filled with despair. His wife covered her face and sobbed softly. Just then, Bull's phone rang. Bull didn't answer, but it rang again. Bull glanced at the caller ID and walked to an empty corner. Boss, are you busy, Bull? Boss, I want to borrow money from you. How much? $200,000. I promise I'll pay you back, no matter the interest. Bull, are you short of money? My daughter needs an operation, but I can't afford it right now. But I promise I have a way to get the money, Bull promised. Bull, borrowing money is out of the question. Bull's face turned ugly. He had expected this outcome. After all, he didn't have a stable job. The man was his boss, not his father. How could he lend him money? It would be a waste of money. But the man on the other end said, I have a job. Are you willing to take it? If you do, the money for your daughter's operation should be no problem. What job? I'll take it. Jail. What? Take the blame? Yes and no. I don't understand. I'll give you an address. Go there and wait. Someone will contact you. Sure. Bull didn't have time to think. He hurried to the address. It was an empty beach. There wasn't a single person. Rocks and rotten wood were everywhere. Bull waited there with a heavy heart. However, no one came even when the sky turned dark. Just when he thought that the person had stood him up, a figure appeared in the distance. Bull immediately charged toward the figure. When he got closer, he realized that it was an Asian. Bull asked hesitantly, Are you the person our boss mentioned? Chun Xiao smiled at Bull. You need money? Chapter 26-21. Of course. If I didn't need money, do you think I'd be here? Bull said bluntly. Then I'm the one you're waiting for. How much can you give me? Bull wanted to know how much money Qin Zhao could give him, not what he needed him to do. As long as the price was right, he didn't mind taking the blame for this Asian. Enough for you to be a Hollywood star every day. I need the exact amount. I need a lot of money right now. Here's a check for $2 million. You can cash it at the bank now. Bull was taken aback. 2 million USD. This wasn't what he'd expected. After all, taking the blame for someone in Los Angeles cost tens of thousands of dollars. $2 million. You're not asking me to take the death penalty, are you? Bull paled in fear. Are you willing to accept the death penalty? Bull's expression was conflicted. After a while, he finally looked up. I'm willing. Chan Zhao finally smiled. Don't worry, it's not the death penalty. Qin Zhao was also testing Bull. He knew Bull's rough situation. He knew that Bull had a seriously ill daughter. He needed a lot of money. For the sake of his sick daughter, he could bear the consequences of trading his life for another's. This meant that he loved his daughter. This was what Qin Zhao needed. If Bull didn't have anything to worry about, Qin Zhao wouldn't dare to use him. Are you sure you want to give me a 2 million commission? It's not a commission. It's a deposit, Qin Zhao said calmly. Deposit? Bull's eyes almost popped out. Are you sure you're not messing with me? The check is in your hand. You can cash it at the bank now. The bank is long closed now. Ha! I made an appointment with a bank. They'll delay the closing time for me. Bull looked at the check in his hand. What exactly do you need me to do? My car's over there. I'll take you to the bank. Bull thought for a moment and finally nodded. He didn't have anything for Qin Zhao to covet. The most valuable thing he had was the check in his hand. Chen Zhao had personally delivered it to him. Therefore, he did not need the other party to ask for anything from him. Sitting in Chen Zhao's luxury car and feeling the soft cushion, Bull asked, "Can you tell me now?" "In the next 2 days, someone will look for you and ask you to kidnap my family." Bewildered, Bull stared at Chen Zhao in astonishment. "And then, record everything he said to you. Then my family will disappear for a few days, and on the 3rd day after the incident, the police will break into your hiding place, arrest you, and rescue my family." Bull's mind was still in a daze. "And then you will expose that person. You will say that all of this was ordered by him. At the same time, you will take out all the evidence that you prepared beforehand. Do you have a grudge against that person?" Since he found people to kidnap my family, of course, there's a grudge between them. But there should be a reason, right? Being rich is the biggest sin. 2 million is just your down payment. After it's done, you'll get the rest." "How much?" 8 million. You'll get 10 million in total. Aren't you afraid that I'll bite you after taking the money? If you work for me obediently, you can enjoy life after you get out, or you can live precariously with the 10 million. You have to be careful that I'll find you at all times. You won't even dare to use the money. Think about what kind of life you want. How many years is kidnapping? Under normal circumstances, 5 to 10 years, but you did well by exposing the person. I'll also arrange for a lawyer to reduce your sentence. You only need to stay in for 3 years, Chen Zhao said. Then, I'll arrange for you to perform well during your sentence. You probably won't be in there for more than 2 years. After a long silence, Bull finally asked the question that concerned him the most. Will you silence me? You don't know me, so you don't know, Chen Zhao said. But you should trust Morgary's reputation, right? Bull couldn't help but look up at Chen Zhao. Morgary was the leader of the largest gang in L.A. In the past 2 years, he'd been like an emperor in L.A.'s underground world. However, he didn't just have an illustrious reputation. Another reason was that he had a great reputation. There had never been a case of a black on 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 black he'd also said that even if the person he worked with came alone, he'd let them leave L.A. unharmed. This wasn't an exception either. It was a creed that Morgary followed to the end. In the past, Morgary had a line that sold some military weapons. After the two parties reached an agreement, the change in the market caused the price of the weapons to skyrocket. He still sold them at the agreed price. So, basically everyone on the streets of L.A. trusted Morgary now. As long as Morgary said it, he'd definitely fulfill his promise. So, when Chen Zhao mentioned Morgary, Bull somewhat believed him. How are you going to give me the rest of the money? Chen Zhao chuckled. If I only give you 2 million, will you take the job? Bull thought for a moment and nodded. I will. So, I don't need to give you any more promises. 2 million is enough for you to work for me. Even 200,000 is enough. Since I've made such a precious promise, it only shows my sincerity, Chen Zhao said calmly. Of course, if you want to know the exact steps, I'll explain it to you. You just need to open a joint account for your daughter. After each step, I'll transfer $2 million to the account until it's over. Unless you have a problem with a certain step, I'll stop the transfer. That's right, Chen Zhao said. Chen Zhao was also subtly reminding Bull that he knew about his precious daughter. Even if Chen Zhao wouldn't really do anything to her, it was still enough to intimidate him. Also, I need to remind you that if you change your statement halfway, you'll also be charged with perjury. It's not much lighter than your original crime. Plus, I won't let you walk out alive. So, from the moment you started this mission, you have to complete it. There's no turning back. I know. Bull knew. After all, the biggest taboo in their line of work was being a fence-sitter. A fence-sitter might end up in a situation where neither side liked him. Chun Zhao's mission wasn't that hard to accept. In fact, it was much easier than the mission that he had originally thought would be a one-way trip. So, he didn't plan on betraying Qin Zhao.